AI will change the course of human progress. It's transforming lives and companies alike, from craftspeople to global corporations. What drives innovation from lab to market? How is AI creating sustainable manufacturing, a greener future, and smarter cities? Welcome to the Applied Artificial Intelligence Conference 2024, Austria's leading AI platform where thought leaders and industry giants shape the future. And the future is now. Are you ready for it?
Are you ready? I'm ready. So, good morning and a very warm welcome. Welcome to the Applied Artificial Intelligence Conference 2024, this big international conference that is organized by the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber together with its partners Advantage Austria, AI Austria and Enterprise Europe Network. Well, it's the 6th edition of this conference, but believe me, this time, this event is even bigger and more bombastic than it has ever been before, also due to the fact that this time it is held in a hybrid format. So welcome to all of you who are joining us here at Julius Raabsaal, or here in person, and a warm welcome to all of you who are following this event via our live stream. I mean, it's fantastic. Today we're bringing together more than 1,000 AI experts from around the globe, from more than 70 different nations. So entrepreneurs from all over the world and different sectors, AI software developers and researchers, innovators and decision makers. Welcome to all of you. I mean, today we have the chance to shape the future together, the future of AI in business. So what can all of you expect from this journey into this future from this event? What you can definitely expect is a mixture, a firework of information and inspiration, trends and innovation. So during this whole day, you will have the chance to develop different applications of AI in economy. We're going to delve deeper into 4 different key industries, namely startups, green technology, manufacturing, and urban technologies. You can look forward to keynotes of international experts, to different panel discussions and in-depth workshops. But this is not only an event, it's also a platform that all of you can use to broaden and to expand your network, to get in touch, to get in an exchange with experts from around the globe. You can do that during the breaks for those of you who are here in person. Maybe you can just stop by at our exhibition area, which I warmly recommend. Some of you have arranged one-to-one and B2B meetings that start at about 3 p.m. And for those of you who are following us via the live stream, you can use digital networking. So please take this opportunity to exchange opinions and ideas, maybe to make completely new business contacts. And this would be perfect to develop even new business strategies and partnerships today. So all in all, it's going to be an exciting and inspiring and innovative day that all of you can look forward to. I definitely do. Now I'm looking forward to handing over to her. She will officially open this Applied Artificial Intelligence Conference 2024. Please warmly welcome the Deputy Secretary General of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, Mariana Kühnel.
Warm welcome and good morning to today's conference. We have a whole week of artificial intelligence, and I'm really looking forward to focus this day on the application on AI, because this is crucial for our prosperity, for our competitiveness, not only in Austria, but even more in Europe. It's really great to see that so many know in the meantime how important artificial intelligence is, and that we have a full room here, but we have a couple of hundreds people even in front of their laptops all over the world. And this is really crucial because We know how important artificial intelligence is, but we need to become even more people who are aware about the potential of artificial intelligence, the growth potential, and as well the efficiency and bureaucracy help artificial intelligence can offer us. The good news is we have a recent study that 73% of Austrian companies are convinced that artificial intelligence is the key technology for the next at least 10 years. But at the moment, only 20% implement artificial intelligence so far in their companies. And this is for us to prove we need to be even more louder how important artificial intelligence is and what's the real potential on it. Therefore, we need to stop writing papers and strategies and get into real action in Austria and even more on the European level, because that's for sure, if we do not do it, others will do. I don't know how many of you are aware how much money the big 4 US tech companies invest in AI. It's about 10 billion. Some of you might think per year, but no, it's per month. And so that's for me a proof AI, it's about speed together with money. And this is where we need to decide, and we have a choice to decide if we want to be, as Austrian, as European Union, on the sideline as referee, or we want to be a key player on the soccer ground, on the playing field, and define the standards and values from our point of view that our AI need to apply, or otherwise others for sure will do it, and they at the moment already do it in tremendous amounts of money. This is a key choice, not only because it's a key technology, but even more important in difficult times, and this is what Austria as well as the European Union are going through at the moment. We all are in search of growth potential. At the moment, some of our countries are more in recession than in growth and prosperity. And this growth potential, digitalization, and as even more important, artificial intelligence, the recent studies show us that within the next 10 years, only these technologies has the potential on 40 billion additional GDP only in Austria. So it's the necessity that we even more focus on the potential that artificial intelligence has to shape the future with our values and standards. And these potentials, you all know this, and we have a lot of deep dives during the day today. The potential is on different levels. It's on efficiency increase and cost reduction. That's important in Austria as well as in the European Union, as bureaucracy is the biggest burden for growth. This is what our companies, our members tell us. So automatization, even more automatization in reporting, no matter if we talk about ESG or other papers all of you need to fill out for different authorities, there you can save time to have more time for creativity, for strategy thinking, as well as for being with the client and work with the client on future business potential without paperwork or less paperwork. And we figured out this growth potential and business potential. It's about deepfake scanners. There are different applications you can use with AI. And as we know from last week, you can even win a Nobel Prize with the application on AI. And this was about the protein structure prediction. And this is really important to have even better research on diseases, on medication, and even on vaccinations. And so you see the potential of AI. They are really great opportunities. The good news is you all know how many applications we have with AI and how many potentials we have. And the good news is as well, Austria does not need to hide on the issue of AI, because we have a really strong research base in Austria. We have more than 400 institutions within the field of AI, no matter if we talk about startups and as well research institutions, of course, really successful companies that already focus and use these AI for manufacturing, healthcare, energy, and additional sectors. So let us focus on the strength we all have. Let us focus on the potential, and don't let the fear hold you back, but instead be inspired how diverse artificial intelligence can be used and can be implemented. So let us use this day today to inspire ourselves, to use the day to be even more motivated to seize the opportunity we see with AI, and then drive your success story, drive Austria's success story, hopefully drive European success story, and let us then shape the future together with our values, with our standards, and use this potential AI has for all of us for additional prosperity and a really great life, not only in Austria and the European Union, but worldwide. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks to Mariana Kühnel. Well, I know that this topic, this future topic, is particularly close to her heart. So let's take this passion with us and now get involved in this event. Let's start. Now, I'm delighted to welcome our first keynote speaker, who we are really happy and proud to have here today. He has been in charge of the AI activities at Sony AI, which is part of the Japanese Sony group, for many years. And under his leadership, many innovative AI solutions have been developed, but not only developed, but put into practice. Put into practice in, as you might hear and see later on, in even surprising areas, from gaming and image processing to gastronomy. He will tell us more. Please accept a warm welcome to the CEO of Sony AI, Michael Spranger. Welcome.
Hello, good morning, Vienna. I'm very proud to be here. Thanks for the invitation and for looking really forward to this day of great talks and panels. So I'm going to talk to you about this organization called Sony AI and some of the projects that we're doing to try and transform Sony into an AI-powered company. But before I go there, I did want to tell you a little bit about Sony. So you might know Sony as an electronics company, right? So the TVs, the audio equipment, and of course that is still a very important part of the company, but it's actually a rather small part of the company today. In fact, 60% of the revenue of Sony comes from entertainment. And so that is gaming, so that's iconic brands like PlayStation, PlayStation Studios, which is creating the content. That's Sony Pictures, which is very much engaged in movie production, TV production, in some cases in streaming. An iconic brand of this is Columbia Pictures, which you may know from many famous movie titles. And then also Sony Music. So Sony Music is the second largest music publisher in the world. And so that combined is 60% of the revenue. And we still do electronics, like TVs and so on, and that's very important to the company. But there's also another part of the company that many people don't realize is part of Sony. Sony is the largest CMOS image sensor producer in the world, right? So your smartphone, about 50% chance that the sensor for the camera is coming from Sony. And then in Japan, we also have financial services. And so Sony AI is an organization that is catering to all these parts of Sony and trying to transform the company into an AI-powered company. And what that means for us is primarily AI for creativity. So that is around game production, movie production, music creation. But it's also focusing on the chip designers and the people that create new semiconductors in order to bring image processing into the world. And we also have projects on real-world entertainment as well as scientific discovery, all focusing on really creators. And so I think one of the differences that we bring to the table is we work with people across the company on a day-to-day basis, artists, chip designers. And what we would like to do is to develop this technology together and for people. And so this is where our mission comes from. Our mission is to unleash human imagination and creativity with AI. Just briefly, Sony AI is the strategic R&D unit for Sony. We're directly reporting to headquarters, to the CTO of the whole group, as well as the CEO. We were established 4 years ago. We have offices in Tokyo, in Zurich, Barcelona, Bangalore, Mumbai, as well as Boston, but we also work with people across many countries in a remote way, because obviously Sony has many offices across the world, so we can basically hire wherever we find the best talent. We're about 200 people and a very international group of people from all continents except Antarctica. We do, just to give you a little bit of a high-level overview of some of the projects we're doing, so we work a lot on AI ethics. That's a really core part to us, specifically because of this interaction between the technology and people. We work a lot on generative AI, specifically for creation of images, music, speech, 3D. We obviously have a strong team working on computer vision, so we work on foundation models there. We work on AI for chip design. And we also work on using AI to bring more content from the world to the whole of the world, so around translation, subbing, and so on. And then there's one project which I think has been really successful, and that's the one I really want to talk to you about today. And that project is called Gran Turismo Sophie, and it is one of our key flagship projects. But it's also a project that very clearly shows how we think about transformation within Sony and how we would like to influence the company to really adopt AI going forward. And so this is a project, Gran Turismo Sophie. This is the name of a racing agent. Okay, we developed that racing agent for the game Gran Turismo, which is a 25-year PlayStation title. It's been very successful franchise that is part of PlayStation for a very, very long time. And what we build is a racing agent that can compete at the highest level with some of the best esports professionals in the sport of racing, specifically on Gran Turismo. Now, what is interesting here is that when we built this racing agent, we actually created a really high-level technology breakthrough that was recognized to be on the cover of Nature, which obviously is one of the biggest scientific journals, maybe the most important scientific journal in the world. And it was not just published there, but it also made it on the cover. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story of why this is, why it's interesting, and how it helped us in this transformation process that we're leading inside Sony. But before I go there, I'll show you a quick video.
There's very few places where you can go out and say, I'm going to build an AI, and I'm going to make it truly superhuman.
We're going to create artificial intelligence that will unleash the power of the human creativity and imagination.
Gran Turismo Sophie is a super exciting project. It's an amazing AI research and development activity.
There are many racing games where the physics is half done, but in Gran Turismo, that racing sensation that the players get, that's really at the core of the game.
この車文化、車という存在をもう丸ごとビデオゲームの中に再現したいなと思ったんですね。
Because of the realism of the game, it is actually very difficult to program agents.
We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what things we needed to change in order to get that superhuman performance.
Why are we building this GT Sophie agent?
This is not just a technical breakthrough project. It really is about bringing AI into the hands of the game developers who are going to build the new experiences for the players.
本当にすごいアグレッシブで、これからもっと一緒にレースしていきたいなっていうふうに思いましたね。
All right, so there you go. So it's a really big technical breakthrough, and just want to very briefly explain why that is the case. So Gran Turismo is a highly real physical simulation of racing. In fact, you might have seen a movie called Gran Turismo, which incidentally is produced by Sony, which is about a racer that, some kid from the UK, Jan Maddenborough, and he learned to race in the game. And then within 3 months, he was drafted into a Nissan Academy to race real race cars. Right? He had never done that before in his life. And within 3 months, he transitioned to being a real race car driver, and he was actually successful in that. Basically racing against some of the best professionals in the actual racing world. So that tells you something about the physical realism of the game. And so the agent had to learn to master that, right? And racing is really interesting because racing is sort of at the edge of control, right? So a very small move or change in steering can be the difference between the best lap of your life and a crash. And so the agent mastered that. But this is not where it stops, right? It's not just you versus the track. Once you have other racers on the track, they actually change the physics again. So if you have a car in front of you, your braking cycle, your acceleration, all of those things change. And of course, if you try to overtake somebody, that person is going to fight back. So you have to sort of master the tactics of the game. And then finally, sports etiquette. So sports etiquette is really interesting because it's a relatively vague concept. So obviously, you can't just crash into other cars in the real world that could lead to injuries or death. But I really would describe racing as a sort of dance, which is both collaborative and competitive. So you have to sort of collaborate, not to basically crash into other cars and just throw everybody off track. But at the same time, you're trying to win, right? And so you're trying to be competitive. And mastering this is a real breakthrough, and this is the reason why that project made it on the cover of Nature. We used a technique called deep reinforcement learning. It's relatively famous. You might have heard about some breakthroughs around Go and other games. Very, very briefly, what you do is you train an AI agent based on information that you get from the world. In this case, the world is the game. So it is a GT Sport, and you can roughly think of this as information that will be available to an autonomous car. So that could be vision and some other features. And then, of course, you're taking actions, right? So the agent has to take actions, whether to brake or steer, and that can influence the next state of the game. And then finally, the way this agent is trained, is a neural network that learns to drive from scratch, doesn't know anything about the world, and then learns to drive very good, and then drive superhuman, is something called reward. And the reward tells the agent whether it is doing something that's good or whether he's doing something that's bad. And so obviously, crashes are bad, losing a position on track is bad, but overtaking, being fast, that's good. And that's all that we need to train this agent from scratch to be the best racer. It's a really important collaboration across many groups of Sony. So obviously, we worked with the game developer. They're called Polyphony Digital, based in Japan. But we also used massive infrastructure to train these agents. And that infrastructure was provided to us by Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is basically PlayStation. What they have is they have a lot of compute across the world that's usually used by gamers for streaming. But gamers are only awake from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m., so there's a lot of time that we can use actually to train agents. We did many different combinations of cars and track to show that the agent can really be successful in not just one car-track combination. And we raced some of the best drivers. And then obviously, we had many events. And then in one event, the final event, we actually achieved a superhuman score, beating the humans on all car-track combinations. So that's step one, but this is not the end of the story, because for us it's important that, it's good to be superhuman, but we want to be helpful and interesting to people. And so there's some really encouraging remarks here from some of the best drivers that basically tell us that they're now starting to learn from these agents how to drive better in their own way. This is one of the races, so I'm going to challenge you to tell me which of those cars is driven by the AI versus by a human racer. And it also gives you a sort of impression of how tight these races can be and how competitive they can be and how fun they also can be for the human drivers. And the human driver in this case is the white car. Right? And in this particular race, they were racing really for a long time against each other and very competitively. Now, we can train these agents not just to be superhuman, but we can train them to do all sorts of fun stuff. And so here we train an agent to really maximize drifting. And again, this is very difficult to do for humans. And it basically provides the first example of how to do drifting in this game at a very high level. And now this can be used also by humans to learn these new skills. Now, the last part of the story, so the superhuman success was number one. But what we then did is we moved this agent to be able to drive at many different levels and at all cars and track combinations across the game, and then integrated it into the game. So if you buy Gran Turismo 7, which is the current version of the game today, you can actually race against GT Sophie. And so we made it into product, and that was actually done within 1 year of the big scientific breakthrough. And what you see here is just a launch trailer, which is basically a part of the marketing and the commercialization of this technology to the players based on the amazing feedback that we got, not just from the best drivers, but from players around the world. So I think this is the important part of the story, right? So we chose a difficult problem that we weren't able to solve before using traditional methods. We applied AI. It was a big technical breakthrough. We validated this externally through the Nature publication. And then it took us about a year to bring that technology essentially to the masses, to the millions of players that are playing Gran Turismo on a daily basis. Now, that's step one. We believe that this technology can not just be important for racing games, but it can be important for all the games that are part of the PlayStation universe. But before we had this breakthrough, it was very difficult to make that argument. And now, because we have that big breakthrough, we do have the commercialization, we can now have discussions and conversations with other game developers on how this technology can change the way they are developing their games. And that's really the most important story here, or part of the story that hinges on transformation. So obviously, I come from research. I'm really excited about Nature papers. I'm also an engineer. I really like doing product. But what's more important to me from the Sony AI broader perspective is how do we use these projects to drive the transformation across Sony, not just for agents or gaming, but across all the different business sectors that we're interested in. And of course, you have to start somewhere. And what we start is essentially the big breakthroughs, the things that inspire the developers, the creators across the company to take on this technology and think about how they can use it in their daily developments, in their next product. And for us, it's important to do these Nature papers to inspire that confidence and give that inspiration. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg, because what really survives are the things that we build while we're doing this, which are much deeper and sometimes a little bit more boring than the Nature papers. So one of the things we did, and I kind of hinted at that, is we not just had the racing agent, but we built a whole platform, a whole infrastructure of training these agents for games. And we validated that using Gran Turismo, but now we can basically onboard any game on PlayStation, and we can train agents to do that. But all of this can only be done if you hire the best people. And so one of the things that we did in the process of doing all of this is we set up Sony AI, we built new HR policies, we built new compensation policies in order to attract and retain the best talent. And those are the things, right? So if you think about the Nature paper, the impact of a Nature paper is probably a year or 2 years. The data platform and infrastructure, that's probably sort of 5-year type horizons. But if you hire the best people, that can set the company up for change for the next 10 to 20 years. And ultimately, what we're really doing also with Sony AI is we're reinventing the way R&D is done in Sony. So R&D, as I mentioned before, traditionally electronics company, very different type of research or different research structure in terms of how R&D is done. And I think all of these things have to change in order for the company to truly become an AI-enabled company. Thank you very much.
Michael Spranger, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks, Michael. Wow, what an inspiring start. It once again underlines which new opportunities and perspectives AI can open up perhaps also in your business. That's what this whole conference is all about. Now, I would suggest to delve deeper into it and have a look at other AI projects and how they are already delivering real benefits. Other projects in different areas such as healthcare, finance, and infrastructure, and how you, coming from completely different industries, can use those AI processes to promote innovation, as Mariana has already said, to increase efficiency and to open up completely new business opportunities. You will get insights from both the European and the global perspective in our opening panel. I'm now delighted to welcome 2 renowned experts to the stage, actually 3, because one will be guiding you through this panel. Please warmly welcome the Managing Director of the European AI Forum, Daniel Abbou, the Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google, Lucy Georgieva, and your host, the co-founder and chairman of AI Austria, Clemens Wassner.
Hello, morning.
Welcome. Thanks thanks for being here today. We're looking forward to a surely exciting discussion. I'm handing over to you, Clemens.
Yep, thank you, Ina. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Also, good morning to the YouTube stream. For the next 20 minutes in this panel, as the title says, we would like to talk about the economic impact of AI and especially what's in it from an SME perspective. And before we dive into the questions, so to speak, I would like to ask each of you for a very brief opening statement. So, ladies first.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. And hello, everyone, to the YouTube stream. Very nice to hear that. I think if we talk about artificial intelligence and economic impact, it's an underestimation that we say it will have an economic impact. We have seen the growth and the use and the awareness around AI for the last several years. As a company, as Google, we've been using AI for quite a long time. I will drop here now a bit the Nobel Prize. I think this is the moment where you can see what AI can actually achieve and benefit for society. On the economic part, AI, in particular generative AI, economists call it general purpose technology like electricity or steam technology. It has really the impact to accelerate productivity and efficiency. It will have a lot of the potential to to reduce simple tasks by automatization. It will also have the opportunity and the possibility to grow with productivity through. Sorry, I'm a bit of a didn't have a coffee in the morning, so that's always a bad start. In any sense, I think we will talk about some numbers I brought with me afterwards, but I think we used last year, in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot about excitement on the use of AI, and I think now it's the question how to use it in particular. We have seen with Google Cloud quite a lot of uptake through business, small and big businesses, and this is very interesting how it will actually also produce productivity, and the question is that you need just to make the first step to start using it.
Thank you very much. We will dive into the numbers later on because you brought lots of numbers. So, Daniel, please, a short opening statement.
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel. I had 2 coffees this morning. I'm the general manager of the German AI Association and also of the European AI Forum. So, and I'm from your favorite neighboring country, which is not Switzerland. The point is the following. I think we have the last 2 years or 3 years. What is AI? What is generative AI? The whole discussion about the problems and the risks and stuff like that. And you had the point which we all have in the problem of implementation, and now we have to solve the point that we have not to talk about AI, that we have to implement AI. But the problem is that we have a very, how can I say, Hollywood-like discussion about AI. You have, on the one hand, in the tech bubble, who say AI is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and on the other hand, you have the people who say it's the worst thing that ever happened to humankind. And this is both, if I can say this on YouTube, bullshit. We have to demystify AI. We have to break it down to concrete use cases and stop this Hollywood-like discussion about AI and to see where it can help the people, society, but also companies. And I think this is the task we have to do in 24, 25, 26, is to demystify AI and giving companies and people the possibility of seeing where it concretely can help us. We have to get out of this philosophical discussions, and this would be my opening statement. Thank you.
Amen, brother.
Amen.
Thanks a lot. Speaking of SMEs, because both of you brought this up, We've been doing this event, Applied AI conference, together with the Austrian Economic Chamber already now for 6 years. So I think this is our 15th or 16th event.
Okay.
And what we noticed is it's very easy to, let's say, get this into action from the large corporations. So if you have, let's say, stock-listed companies, they listen to the applications or the applied AI examples, and afterwards it takes them maybe 12 to 18 months until they set up their own, let's say, use case discovery, POCs, and so on. At the same time, we found out that if you want to reach the SMEs, you really need to go where the SMEs are. So we also had, for example, a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, a tour through all of Austria, through all of 9 provinces, where we engaged with SMEs, and there the discussion was, how can you actually use this in an SME environment where you don't have dedicated teams for AI, or sometimes you don't even have development teams. So it would be interesting to hear, how do you see this in Germany, the SME perspective? Like, what is your organization doing, both on a German level and, let's say, European level, specifically to bring AI to SMEs?
I think it is a point of which kind of use cases do you want to implement into an SME? If some tech bros are coming and saying, so with AI we will completely change your company, you have a very defensive point on the other side. And what you have also to realize is that there is a generational gap in how we use data, how we access data, how we want to share data. So one of my classic examples is like, for example, you have a 65-year-old SME CEO, who lives like 40 years in his data silo, and his biggest fear is that his blueprints end up in Shenzhen or in Hong Kong. On the other hand, you have the 25-year-old entrepreneur, AI entrepreneur, who goes to the 65-year-old and said, the best thing you should do is make data sharing with your competitors. And then they're off. This is not the case. What I think the tech bubble has to realize is to make simple, easy to understand use cases within the SMEs. This can be from back office to process automation or whatever. But we don't have to overwhelm them with this, we will change your company and stuff like that. We have to make it concrete. We have to make it simple. So I think half a year ago, I don't know the English name, but Schreinerinnung Bayern. And this was really interesting, because I asked them, what do they need, or what do they think they need that AI can help them with? And they gave me a list. It was many back office stuff and stuff like that. And I gave it to our Bayerische Landesgruppe, and from the AI Association. And they were quite shocked what the Schreiners, the carpenters, would like to have. And I think there's a disparity in the tech bubble, what they think companies need. And I think it should be a learning process that AI companies learn what kind of products SMEs or KMUs need. That would be, I think, a very important point, understanding each other.
Thanks for the insights. Now, Ludmila, finally we can get to the numbers. Google very recently carried out a study across Europe about the economic impact of AI. And as coincidence have it, you also had a deep dive on Austria. So maybe you can share a little bit of insights about the study as such, and specifically what were some key findings, so interesting aspects in the Austrian ecosystem.
So indeed, we did the study with Implement Consulting Group, and it was in particular for Austria interesting to see that the growth potential of generative AI. And it's kind of like in the next till 2030, there is like a potential of 8% GDP growth, 35 to 40 billion euros. And this is something that sounds amazing. It's a big potential. The question is how. And when you see the requirement would be 50% of companies are really have use cases on AI. Now we have 11%. So this is a bit kind of moment where you realize we have a lot of potential, but also a lot of work to do. We also see a difference between SMEs and larger companies. So larger companies, uptake of AI is around 30 to 40%. Within small and medium-sized enterprises is around 7 to 10%. So there is, again, this gap about how to bring the use cases. I think these are numbers. There is a lot of growth potential in terms of the service sector. Also in terms of agriculture, tourism, healthcare as well. Interesting is also we looked into the job market, what it means for the job market, and we realized that actually only 7% will be negatively affected by AI and generative AI. 35% of the jobs out now existing won't be really affected, and around 60%, 60% will be positively affected by generative AI. So there's again also because we've been talking one of those words, Fachkräftemangel, in Germany, in Austria, when you the lack of experts in the different areas. Again, here AI can help to reduce those simple tasks which are really boring and really quick, but also it will create a lot of new jobs as well and the need for other things. So I think these are numbers, and again, I'm with you talking about use cases. 2 weeks ago, we had the Google Cloud Summit in Vienna, featuring a lot of companies using Google Cloud, and I was really amazed what kind of companies are using already AI. And if I may just give 2 examples. One of an Austrian company, which is Emmy Award-winning about movies. They're using AI in the cultural sector. And also, I hope, please bear with me, biologist company that use AI to measure the different, the internet of the cow. So it's very interesting to see how it's actually a very simple use case, but it actually helps a lot, and they're quite of a successful, and it's basically using different sensors and AI to predict, to measure, and to estimate if a cow will be ill or sick, early alerts, and all of that. So these are very small use cases, but also, again, what is very important for us is as a company to say there is a big social benefit. And I think the Nobel Prize was mentioned by Marianne in the morning, using AI to predict proteins. And this is what Google DeepMind did. And I think this is what really accelerates now research and medical treatments. So this is from very small use cases to those really big flood prediction as well. And I think these are the big ones, just to help us to really solve and together social challenges. And then the small ones, really fascinating use cases.
I think that what you just said is so important, because of course it can be the big use cases, but the simple ones, also because of that people understand why AI can help them. So if I can make just a simple example there, a good friend of mine is a nurse in a hospital in Germany. And when she has her 9-hour shift, 1 to 1.5 hour is completely stupid Schreibarbeit. Yeah? She has to, with a pencil, yeah, mark the prescriptions she's writing out. She has to make, Strichlisten, yeah, 2024, yeah, Strichlisten. Then sometimes she has to convert them, type it into Excel and stuff like that. 1 to 1.5 hours from her 8 to 9 shift. What you said about the skilled worker shortage, she didn't do the job because she wants to do Strichlisten, yeah? She wants to help people. Why can't we give her a kind of chatbot with sensors and stuff like that? You can reduce, and this would be no thing at all, to reduce this time from 1 hour to like 15 to 20 minutes. And the rest of the time she has to interact with the patients and stuff like that. These are quite simple tasks in the thing. And there we can see, and there we can help people with that. And the skilled worker shortage that we have will become greater the next years. And without AI, it would be crazy not to use it. But we have to point it out to the people in simple cases, and there I would completely agree.
Yeah, this is like the perfect entry point to the next round of questions, because in the pre-discussion just now, where 2 of us had the coffee and One panelist unfortunately did not have a coffee. You said, actually, we had the agreement that the last couple of years was lots about talking about regulation and so on.
Yep.
And strategies and documents and so on. Phone books have been written. But now when you say 2024, look, going forward, what do you think is now necessary to really bring this into the economy as such? So we basically now have the framework. There are certain government grant programs across Europe. I think Speed Invest, the Austrian VC, did a study and they identified around 550 grant programs that are for which AI companies are eligible. But most of the time it's the AI bubble, as you call it, or the tech bros that apply for these grants. What do you think is necessary to really push this now into the broader brick-and-mortar economy?
Well, that's the $2 billion question, I would say. If I would have a 100% sure answer on it, I would work at Accenture. No, but I would say the following. Like we are here at the WKO. We have the industry associations have to realize the importance of this technology. Not only at the WKO itself, but also at its member companies. This, which is done. I was at quite a few WKO events, not only in Vienna, also in other states, Bundesländer. But there is still a deficit in information for CEOs to make the investment decision. I think this is one of the points because, well, let's say Europe's economy problematic at the moment, especially in Germany. But they have to realize that they have to invest, not too much, but they have to commit themselves in this transformation. And I think that's especially also when you see the part of digitalization, which is like 20 years ago, they didn't commit to that as well. And they have to see, I hope they see the historic error they did in not digitizing as much and getting on board because the AI startups are here. Yeah, they are in Vienna, they are in Graz, they are in Linz, and they are ready for work because the point is what you just said with the grants. Grants are okay, but bureaucracy hell, but what they want, the startups that in Germany I have the pleasure of representing are clients, are businesses, are having, they don't want KI Innovationswettbewerb 3.0 and things like that. It is about clients and getting in contact with brick and mortar technology, and there has to be investments there, and we have to educate and we have to convince them. And this is which is more a part also, I think, what governments should do in roundtables and stuff like that in delaying this message to the economy.
Speaking of brick and mortar businesses, just bear with me for a second. Time for an audience question and not get blind with the lights. Who of you is from an AI company or AI service provider?
Hello. Okay.
Yes, it's like 10%. And who of you is from, let's say, brick and mortar company or let's say from a non-AI business? Like,
okay.
Good, this raises the question where the difference is working, but it's a good indicator.
Lawyers? Okay, good.
It's not about the AI Act. Now, I mean, as hopefully each of you is aware, we're not just doing this event to give talks and panel discussions and so on, but also that via the B2Match platform that you can book B2B meetings to exactly get in touch with this, let's say, to have this cross-pollination that Daniel and Lucy just laid out. So please make use of it. There are also rooms available for B2B meetings, and they will go into, let's say, especially when the official program ends around 3 p.m. or 3:40. Yeah, something like that. Good, we only have 1.5 minutes left, so there's a brief closing statement, and I think then we will be escorted from the stage already.
Maybe if I, on the question of awareness raising, I think, and as a big company, we always have, of course, also the responsibility. What we're trying to do is here also to raise awareness through upskilling. Upskilling is a very important part where you just, people get in touch with it that are not afraid of it, and not like Terminator coming now into your room, but rather really we launched AI Fundamentals and AI Essentials, basic upskilling courses for people who don't have any technical background. And just for the record, I am a lawyer. I don't have a technical background as well. But this is how you actually can try out. There is a lot of companies working also with little tools in the company as well, just to make it people feel comfortable using this. Try it out. AI is it's not the solution, but it's one of the solutions. It's a tool, it's not the tool. And I think this is important also to be aware. It won't solve all of your problems, but it just make a small use case. Pick up a project that you think that it will be useful. You don't need to make it through a whole company the first moment, just step by step. And I think this is where AI can help. Find a small project, do the upskilling courses. There is quite a lot out there, and I think this is where just to try it out. This is like what I would just suggest. For me as well, AI was completely new as well, a topic, but also just trying it out, using Gemini, writing an email is like, hey, please rephrase. So this is where I'm not a native English speaker, so sometimes English letters are very nice to have someone else giving me just a suggestion. It's, again, up to you if you will use the suggestion, but it's another possibility that you can just use.
Thanks a lot. These are the perfect closing words. To paraphrase Captain Picard, engage with AI. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much to our panelists, to Daniel Abbou and Lucy Georgieva. And thanks to Clemens Wasner, you stay on stage with me, because this was your first panel, but not your last one. We'll take over some of them today.
Covering for two people.
That's fantastic. I mean, we got some insights into what I can make possible today and tomorrow. Now, we want to delve deeper into 4 different key industries in 4 deep dive sessions. You will accompany the first one, which is named Startups and Innovation. And what this discussion will be about, well, Clemens, we could, of course, tell our audience, but I would suggest let's pass this job on to, what else? AI.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Ina, for that wonderful introduction. I'm excited to take the reins from here as we dive into today's Startups panel. We're about to embark on a journey to discover how groundbreaking university research can evolve into successful AI startups. We'll explore the innovation pipeline, from the lab to the market, and hear from leaders who've made this transformation happen. Our experts will shed light on how research can drive the next big AI venture, sharing key insights and strategies for success. So let's get started. And remember, we're here to aim for success.
Of course we do. We aim for success thanks to our AI co-presenter who will accompany us during the whole day. That's amazing. Well, let's start. You will take over the session, guide us through. So maybe just take a seat, prepare and relax, because I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce your discussion partners. 3 experts representing on the one hand research, on the other hand the startup world. So we're bringing those 2 worlds together today. So please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Yasuhiro Katagari, Director of the National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology. Alfred Taudes, Professor at Vienna University of Economics and Business. And Go Sutsui, Managing Director of Godot GmbH and co-founder and CTO of Godot Inc. Welcome, Clemens. It's again your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Ina. And hello, long time no see. And also thanks panelists for coming. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Yeah, some of you might wonder how come I would say you have a sort of Japan-leaning panel here, because obviously we have 2 participants from Japan joining us, but then you have Professor Taudes, who has been, let's say, doing research collaborations with Japan for as long as I read newspapers, I think. We also met because we had one of these cooperations. And myself, I also spent 7 years in Japan. But the reason is there is the upcoming expo next year. And when we started to prepare for this event, the preparation started already 1 year ago. We said we also want to be this one part of the road to the expo, and what would be better than to talk about the two AI ecosystems and commercializations at the example of our two countries, Japan and Austria. So without further ado, I would like each of you maybe a very brief opening statement, who you are and what your company is doing. So I would start with Susui-san.
Yep. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Go. I am a co-founder and CTO of Godot Inc., based in Kobe, Japan. And also, I am a managing director of Viennese subsidiary here in Vienna. And our company develops a behavioral intelligence platform to support our enterprise client or public agency clients improve their customer success rate or customer satisfaction rate with AI and behavior sciences. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my company is a university, Vienna University of Economics and Business, but I'm also a visiting professor in Kobe, as we found before. And it's great to be here. What I'm trying to do as a professor is to really make the best effort to bring all the research that we are doing and our clever students to the market and help startups flourish, because I think the first talk of Sony already showed really that we have to collaborate very deeply to be fast enough to bring this innovation down to earth.
Good. And Katagiri-sama.
Good afternoon. I'm Yasu Katagiri from Japan. I'm a director of AI Research Center of National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology, which is a governmental research institute. We are a research institute and also governmental, so focusing on research, but also since the advent of ChatGPT, this foundation model is a big topic in Japan, as long as AI is concerned. So we are collaborating with lots of governmental and private sectors to how to develop those technology and bring those technology into societies. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, arigatou gozaimasu. Good. For the first round of questions, I would like to start with Taude-san. We talked a lot about, or let's say in your intro statements, you already mentioned each of you, let's say the commercialization of ideas, and it would be interesting to hear from you what can universities do to accelerate the commercialization of ideas, and also where do you see, let's say, the stop? Let's say, where does the activities that the university can set have to stop, and where somebody else has to pick it up, like a governmental organization, like a spin-out center, and so on?
I think the biggest things university can do is break down walls. Break down walls with industry, break down walls between basic research and applied research, and break down walls between disciplines. When I was a young professor, people who had contacts with industry were not so well cherished by the colleagues, because the professor has to look at pure science. Of course, a lot of things have changed, right? Now we have special fundings for university spin-outs. We have accelerator centers, but if you compare to the US, it's still not intensive enough. We have to do more. So basically, for every research seminar, there should be people there who already think about commercialization, because the time from the basic research to the market is shrinking incredibly, and the less walls you have, the better it is. Also in Austria, in our research funding scheme, we basically have basic research, where the output are papers, and we have applied research, where you collaborate with companies. The problem is, if you have really disruptive innovations like ChatGPT, you don't find companies locally, because they're built for all the technologies. And you have to do the basic research and already build new companies. And this does not fit in this typical orderly world of traditional research. And of course, you can be a very good mathematician, but then suddenly, if you want to commercialize your idea, you also need some guys who are really good in marketing. And AI innovation, of course, always crosses boundaries. You have to bring together the good AI researchers and people who really understand the problem. Plus, industry who has the data. And they have to be together. So we really have to rethink all our traditional ways of doing it. Of course, a university also has to do the real job, good teaching and good research. And for that, of course, we need support units that help us. But they should not be isolated. Basically, for each professor you hire, you shouldn't only look about how good are the papers that he or she has written, but also do they have an entrepreneurial spirit? And this should be part of the work. And when I visit my friends at MIT, for them this is totally natural. And here we still have a long way to go.
Okay, see time for an audience question. Who of you is familiar with the initiative Spin-off Austria? Okay, it's bigger than zero, but only one hand bigger than zero.
So we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, no, this was even, I think it was launched 3 years ago, if I'm correct, 2021. It even had the backing of the president, Mr. van der Bellen, and all the involved ministries, so to speak. Maybe a very brief follow-up just to you, Tade-san. Did you feel any tailwind from this activity or any windfall, or did it not really make a difference in the work you're doing?
Well, so far it didn't really made any difference in what we are doing. But for sure, I mean, innovation is something that you cannot really plan. So just having funding and say, oh, because funding there, I do this now. This is, of course, not a good idea. But of course, when you have a good idea, it helps. But you also, of course, the researchers must know that it exists and must have an incentive to do it.
Thank you very much. Now, next, Katagiri-san. You mentioned in your intro statement the collaboration between research and private companies. Please, could you elaborate a little bit how the cooperation model looks like? Like, is this on a project base, or is it like in Oxford where you donate, let's say, a professorship and then for 3 years you look what's happening? Plus, as a follow-up, also, how do spin-outs eventually work?
You know, since the advent of ChatGPT, this large language models or foundation models, that training of those models requires huge computational infrastructures. And the Japanese government decided to provide big supercomputers, create supercomputers. So I think that kind of computational infrastructure and data infrastructure is essential in these days of AI research. So public sectors work on that, or also private cloud providers are working on that. And also, I would like to mention a government initiative program called GENIAC. That's Ministry of Industry, Trade and METI, Export, Trade and Industry, started a program in which they create financial support for LLM development. And it's open to academia and industry and everyone. And the assumption is they are supposed to use those computational infrastructure to train foundation models. It's kind of a catch-up of a big tech company in US have been working on, and also even Japanese government obviously can't provide a big fund compared with US big companies. But we need to at least have the technology, base technology, to develop those foundation models. And once those foundation models can be developed, or the technology or the know-how of developing foundation models is shared with lots of people, then there's this new stage will open in which each private sectors can work on that foundation models to develop their own applications. And that's the kind of way we have been working recently. And I would like to emphasize, not exactly spawn the startup, but we also emphasize the importance of community development, even though private sectors have obviously intellectual property concerns, and they would like to hide their own stuff from other companies. But we try to have closer relationship and find a good balance in sharing information or knowledge in developing foundation models. And that's the kind of thing we have right now that's happening in Japan.
Thank you very much. Maybe one brief follow-up question, because you mentioned a couple of times the compute infrastructure, and this is something the European Commission has been thinking about for a long time. And so there was the public-private partnership formed called EuroCC. And this means in each EU member state, there's now, as a startup or let's say as a non-research entity, you can try to train your models there. I must say from own experience, the people there are very helpful and it works. But from a scale perspective, it works if 10 companies want to do this. Our company, for example, is 20 people. It would not work if 100 companies would like to do this, or 200. So how large is this in Japan, or how easy is it to apply for it if I would like to train a model on this compute infrastructure?
The computational infrastructure is scarce if you think about the number of people who want to work on that. The program GENIAC I mentioned, they had a competitive program, so everybody can submit their proposals, and there's a committee that evaluates those proposals, and only a restricted number of companies or entities are allowed to work on that initially. And I would mention the initial phase, the government chose 10 organizations, and out of 10, 7 were actually startup companies, and 2 were academia, and 1 is a Japanese established telecommunication company. So it's rather, the result-wise, it's helped encourage startup companies to work on that. I'm not sure whether it's completely fair or not, but that's what we have been, or Japanese government have been working on right now.
Yeah, with a rising number, you need a dedicated process to steer this.
Yeah.
Actually, I was a part of like GENIAC program personally. So through that project, I joined as one developer to train large language model from scratch. So actually, like I learned from the how to develop large language models from a GENIAC program. So yeah, for me it works. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, staying with you for the moment. Now switching, let's say, from the research side to the startup side, because you not just have a startup, you even have a GmbH, as is written here, so you actually incorporated also in Austria.
Yeah.
But could you tell a little bit about your startup story from, let's say, academic research to spin out? How did the process work? How, let's say, what would need to be improved for people that want to have a similar path in the future?
Okay. Actually, like we use tons of like scientific result from behavioral sciences and cognitive sciences, but and also like one of our co-founder is like from the behavioral science academia, but we are not like spin out from the university, but we are heavily focused on like research. So one thing we needed to very care about is data quality. So in the research, we always have to pay attention to experiment design to collect high quality data to validate our research result is great or valid. But in reality, if we just go out from the research lab or experiment design, the data quality is basically uncontrollable. because like the data input is not from the experimental design. Data comes from the each individual, our potential customer or stakeholders. So the data quality at the lab or experiment design and the real field is sometimes like there's a gap sometimes. I mean, it depends on like what kind of like industry are you in for AI. For example, like we are using more kind of like social science side. So that's why like data quality control is a very critical thing we have to care about. Because if just imagine like if training data is great, but the real data from the field is not that good, so the model doesn't work. So that's why like we have to care about the kind of data quality stuff. So if you are now working on that kind of thing, first of all, I recommend you to try to get the data from your potential customer by doing some kind of like simulating your product. Then you have to compare what is the difference between the data you collected at experiment design or research lab and also from the real field. And if there is a huge gap, you may have to pay attention to, or you may have to take additional some kind of like action to fill in the gap. So that is the one thing. And I have another point is sometimes like because I'm also like an engineer, so I sometimes like fall in love into what I build. But for startup perspective, we have to fall in love with the issue we're going to work on, because the most like the dominant reason the startup failed is developing or building some product anyone doesn't want. So that's why like we have to fall in love with the issue. But at the same time, as an engineer, we have to find a well-balanced point between the technology we're going to build, like innovative technology we're going to build, and also the true needs from the individual. Especially, we have to find an individual whose hair's on fire because he needs this. He or she has an issue, and he or she might need your innovative product. So that's two things. Yeah.
Thank you. This is to avoid the solution in search of a problem. Great. Thank you. So next, Taude-san, it's your turn again. Because the last time we met actually was around March, and you were then planning to meet Katagiri-san in Japan and to have a closer research collaboration from the Austrian side and the Japanese side. So what do you think is, let's say, the added value of this type of academia networks when it comes to the commercialization of ideas?
Yeah, academic networks are very important because knowledge is created when you exchange it. But I think especially in the case of Japan and Austria, there are a lot of commonalities and complementarities that we could use. And the easiest synergy, for example, is Japan has cool startups, like this young man to my right side, yeah? And he's already in Austria. And of course, Austria has cool startups, and they would have a 120 million market in Japan. Of course, the markets are different and the culture is different, but both countries are also open to the other side. Yeah? Many young students I know, they are fans of manga. Yeah? And they like this kind of Japanese things. And of course, Japanese young people always cherish Austrian things. Of course, in music, if you look at the Austrian pavilion, and of course, this exchange is very important. And also international teams who bring in different perspectives in these things. So it's not the sum of both. Because it has a multiplier, and also the research traditions are quite different. For example, in management, Japan has their own theory from Nonaka, the knowledge-creating companies, which I think fits very good to AI. And this is typically not so well understood in Europe. And if we mix both these research styles and the cultures, and of course integrate the markets, we both can do a lot. And let's be clear, we have a US dominance. And Austria and Japan, if they want to succeed and have their own niches, they have to collaborate. We still are very good in industrial applications. We have Industry 4.0, we have robots in Japan. We have their own rich cultures. We have our own languages. We have strict data protection laws. A lot of things that unite us. And if we join forces, we can compete with the others in our own way.
This is the perfect question to also to address to you, Katagiri-san, because both of you, I think you set up this whole collaboration. Oh my God, it's autonomous card. And please could you share your experience from the Japanese side and also with, let's say, how you deal with international research networks, and how do you think what is the added value for the participants from the Japanese side? Do you think that does it go in the direction of more internationalization, like with Susui-san, or do you see more international researchers coming to Japan and then, let's say, incorporating their company in Shibuya, for example?
I think there's no right way to do that kind of collaborations. There should be lots of different ways. But in terms of research, there's two things. It's just creation of networks of people who share common research interest, and also how to get funding. So those two are the greatest issues, and those two have to go hand in hand. So I think that's the issue. And I think Japan is internationalizing quite rapidly, and particularly young people are quite eager to work, as he shows. Young people, Japanese, are quite eager to work in international setting. So I don't think that's a problem. And also, in terms of industry, university collaboration, within this GENIAC program I mentioned, one academia university professor is also famous in his work in entrepreneurship program. So they use the money GENIAC programs provided to mingle with his activity of entrepreneurship. So they set up a huge number of people participating in LLM development and in competitive style, and that eventually works for two purposes: just raise the level of technology level of lots of people in terms of education of LLM development, or in more general AI technology, and also lots of people who participated in are quite eager to start companies, at least willingly, at the real level. So we will see how that turns out. So there are lots of, and they are quite eager to go international. I'm not sure how many non-Japanese participate in that program, but I think, as I said, there are lots of avenues to expand on research collaboration using internationally.
And maybe one small follow-up question, because the government made some measures in 2021, the Japanese government, like, let's say, asking the state-owned pension fund to invest a certain percentage in venture capital and so on. And I remember reading an article that was in 2022 in The Economist, where they wrote about the startup boom in Japan, where you were, let's say, relatively the number one in the G20 with the highest, let's say, year-over-year increase of new startup formations. So could you tell a little bit which measures did the Japanese government set during COVID so that you now have this startup boom?
I have no idea, sorry.
Okay, because you're in the let's say, I see, in the R&D area. Good. No worries. Because the pension fund is a very big thing.
Yeah.
Good. Coming to you, Susui-san. What was the driving force for your company to actually come to Austria, out of all places, and immediately, let's say, tackle the European market?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, because we use AI a lot, so sometimes people say, why not US and why not UK? But because I personally, I was also I'm an engineer, but trainer at the US, Silicon Valley area. Then I know that there are many information on the web. And if we want to focus on just only AI purely, I can get tons of information and the social mix experience online, especially after the COVID-19. So we consider what we have to find to innovate AI itself, not just algorithmic, not just mathematical breakthrough. Then we realize that. Maybe one of the critical thing for human being is culture and art. And actually all of our co-founder loves music and also loves culture stuff. So that's why we decided that why not go into the very cultural rich place and also traditional rich place to consider the next generation of AI. So that's why then that was coincidence, but we met the Go Austria program offered by Global Incubator Network. That is the, I think, subgroup of FFG, I guess. Then we joined that program, and also through that program we had a contract with Ars Electronica Future Lab, that is the research agency in Linz. Then we started to consider. At the moment, we just consider international project might be fine, but we started to consider why not going to the EU market physically, because the EU going to have an AI Act and also GDPR, and that is a very human-centric approach and a risk-based approach, and we have to be aware the ethical and the socially responsible AI development. So in Japan, it's easy for us to keep up with the information, but just the information, not practice. So if we have to truly experience socially responsible and also ethical AI development, we decided we have to be here in the EU, especially in Vienna. So that's why we decided to go to the EU first. But as a GODO organization, we also approach Southeast Asia countries to work on infectious disease prevention. And also now we are also considering going other international pathways as well. But Vienna is the first step for us.
Thank you. And how big is your office in Vienna? And
now we are a pretty small team. So, but we just founded last year, and also because I'm foreigner, so and also I have to study more about German, so that's why tons of information I have to keep up with as a managing director. But we are now trying to expand our team in Vienna, not bring our employee from Japan. We would like to hire local people here in Vienna. Yeah.
Excellent. So the next question I should address to you in German.
Ich spreche kein
Deutsch. Good. Yeah, we're, let's say, approaching the last quarter of our panel. So, as with each quarter, let's start with Tade-san again. Never change the running system. Let's say the typical question that normally is on everybody's mind when you talk about the commercialization of results is, obviously, which barriers exist at the moment and what still needs to be done to get rid of these barriers. And for example, we will have later on in the Urban Technologies panel participants from the Austrian Institute of Technology. And they are, let's say, very generous and progressive when it comes to fostering spin-outs from the research that is conducting. But let's say this is one example in the country with 50 to 70 research institutions. So if you take the macroeconomic view, Tade-san, in your experience, what would be necessary to really make this a mass movement?
Well, I think the places that I know best, of course, are universities. Jerry Munger said, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And the universities now have a set of performance contracts between ministries, departments, and institutes. And typically there is the number of students you have to take, the number of papers that you write, the number of research proposals you write. but there's no KPI on the number of spin-offs that you make, or the number of patents that you make, or the number of joint collaborations with international startups that you make. That's why all these other support systems are, in a way, isolated. It would be very important to say, for example, if for the next 4 years plan, how many spin-offs are you planning to have? Because then it's on the radar. And it's also on the radar of the directorate. Of course, we have a third mission. Yeah, this is teaching research. But third mission typically is you go out and make one event per semester to tell the public about the research, or you answer the phone if a journalist calls you. And that, of course, is not enough. The second point, of course, is typically research-guided innovations are farther away from the market, like other innovations that are more easy to go, and they are much more risky. And then, of course, we have the European problem that nobody finances it. Recently, the OpenAI guy said, we won't make any profit the next few years, and we will burn hundreds of millions of US dollars. And everybody says, great, that's what we expected from you. Try to raise that in Europe.
Follow-up question. I 100% agree with you, especially in the AI, or let's say in general, in the digital space, this is where Europe is at the moment. But why do you think it does work in pharmaceuticals and life sciences? Because you have lots of life science companies here. I mean, just think of the COVID vaccination and so on. Vienna has a biotech cluster. You have Boehringer Ingelheim now investing, I think, close to 1 billion in the location in Vienna, plus is making an AI research lab for additional 150 million euros. Why is this risk-taking attitude here in these sectors, but not in the digital space?
I think one reason is the patenting system. Because patenting these pharmaceutical innovations, you can also do in Europe. Pure software patents you cannot do in Europe, but you can do in the US. And the second part is this pharmaceutical stuff. It's very fragmented, right? Everybody talks about pharmaceutical, but there are hundreds of markets in a way, yeah? And in AI, basically, you have the typical network effect. One winner takes it all. And you need huge markets. And still in Europe, we don't have a single digital market. In every country, you have different rules, different things here, different things there. And of course, we have the data protection issue. This makes everything more complex. And then, of course, this is what the investors see. And anyhow, I mean, you can serve the world from the US with your bots. So why should you invest in that here?
Lots of work to be done. Maybe to you, Katigiri-san, the same question. How does software patents or IP protection work in Japan? So can you patent an AI algorithm, for example, in the way that you can do it in the United States? Or is it rather difficult? Because in Europe, sometimes it's extremely difficult. And you also have the situation that many patent offices in European countries most of the time reject AI patents. And that's why, for example, many of the companies are forced to, let's say, hand in the patent in Germany, and then from Germany make it to a European patent, which then automatically is valid to cover the entire European Union. So IP protection for AI, how does this work?
I think it's possible to patent AI technologies, but since it's still at incubating phase, so as I told you, still people are trying to share whatever they can share to advance technology. And most of the things private sectors want to close, they don't say anything about it, the know-how and things like that. Also data, what data they use. Their real applications, they just don't disclose the data. So I don't have any strong sense of patent just becoming a hindrance or barrier for AI technology development right now in Japan.
And from which sectors do you see the strongest interest? Like, is it manufacturing or life science, or is it pure software?
As long as I see GENIAC program, they are right now concentrating on business or business document processing, since it's based on LLM technologies. Even in pharmacology-related topics, they haven't yet gone into applying this foundation model technology into, say, drug development. There are lots of people, including our institute, who have been working on that topic. But before that stage, there can be lots of things that can be done with current LLM technologies to help out bioengineering researchers in terms of document searching or document summarizations, or just having a good summary of their experimental data and things like that. And I think that's the current status. And if you go into biotechnology, there are lots of possibilities, but there's also lots of big pharma in worldwide, and it's very difficult to get into that market when you are not big companies. If you think about real drug development, it needs lots of testing before it's real deployment. So those make barriers. So I think small research people are working on particular programs on developing kind of biomaterials and try to sell those technology to other companies. So that's right now, without getting into the business by themselves. But I think that's the character of the market. And I think healthcare is also a big possibility. But I can say that right now, without getting into detail. I'm not sure. There are too many things going on in that area.
Yeah, but thanks for the insights, because I still remember the AI boom in Japan started with the self-driving cars. This was then in 2014 and 15, when Toyota opened the big autonomous research, or let's say autonomous driving R&D center in Silicon Valley, I think for $500 million. So that was really significant. Then Nissan poured money into it, but these were all let's say, manufacturing/automotive-driven innovations. And now it was interesting to hear the second wave of sectors that picked up AI and how they're going to use it. So yeah, I think we're exactly at the end of the time. So unfortunately, no closing statements anymore. But thanks for joining with us, and all of you are also still available here for the B2B meetings later on. So. Yeah, I know you are, because the bus bringing you to Graz is in the afternoon, so you're still here. Great, so thank you very much, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists, to Clemens Wasner, who will be back a little bit later on. We're looking forward to that, Clemens. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was the first part of this Applied Artificial Intelligence Conference 2024. But of course, there's more to come. We have 3 more interesting deep dive sessions prepared that you can look forward to. Now I want to give you the time and chance to take a breath, maybe to enjoy a cup of coffee, and to do what Clemens already said, to get in touch with other participants, to get into an exchange with experts from around the globe. Maybe you find time to stop by in our exhibition area. And one important hint, some of you have already arranged B2B meetings, one-to-one meetings. If you haven't done so far and are still interested, it is still possible to book a one-to-one meeting. You can do that on the 2nd floor. For all the participants following us via the live stream, it's time for a break, time to grab a cup of coffee or just relax. We will be back at 11:30. See you later. And start into the next panel, a panel that will be once again be announced by my AI assistant.
I'm thrilled to announce our next program, the Manufacturing AI Panel. Today, we'll be exploring how artificial intelligence is transforming the manufacturing industry, with insights from experts who are directly shaping its future. From boosting efficiency to optimizing processes, AI is revolutionizing the way manufacturing operates. In this panel, you'll hear from industry leaders about the sustainable advantages AI brings and how it's driving innovation across the sector. So let's dive into the exciting world of AI-powered manufacturing and discover how it's leading us toward a machinized future.
A machinized future sounds good. Thanks to my AI assistant, I would suggest let's start this journey into the future. I would now like to introduce the 4 experts who will help us to create this future picture concerning manufacturing. Please welcome Thomas Moser, Head of Data Science at Prewave, Stefan Fischer-Eder, Product Manager for Industrial AI at Kiba, Takao Terrano, Professor at Chiba University of Commerce, Michael Haselgruber, Key Research and Area Manager at Pro2Future. And this deep dive session will be accompanied by him. Your host is the Editor-in-Chief at Industriemagazin, Rudolf Leudl. Rudolf, now it's your turn. We're looking forward to an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Una, for your wonderful and, may I add, skillfully tech-enhanced introduction. In the next 45 minutes, I'd like to navigate us through the world of AI-driven manufacturing and supply chain management. We want to touch on the challenges we face and the potentials there are for future industrial use. We got an incredible lineup of panelists today, and only 45 minutes to go, so I would say let's dive right in. Let me start with you, Professor Terrano. With 30 years of experience in AI research from the Tokyo Institute of Technology to your current position as professor at Chiba University, what are the key trends in AI-driven production systems in Japan and how do they compare globally?
Yeah. Okay, my name is Takao. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to come here. And I started my AI career about the beginning of 1980s. That time was the second AI era. They developed so-called expert system, expert knowledge directly into the computer codes. That time, strong traditional manufacturing companies, for example, Toyota or Nippon Steel, such a big company developed so many expert systems. But almost all of them were failed because of the maintainability or expandability is very poor that time. Compared with that time, nowadays, systems developed based on so-called neural network or generative AI. So they depend on the data. So some of them are very successful, I think. This is the main trend in current AI. And interestingly, small companies with the so-called industrial robots, they are not so intellectual, but they are used to with human operators. This is the current characteristics of small-sized AI, I think. So, but that the interesting thing, robots are very friendly with Japanese because there are so many manga history. Robots are not enemy, but friends of human. So they, human operators believe such a thing. So collaboration with robots and humans is very natural for us. This is the second trend. And but the problem is that the knowledge transfer, or Professor Tao stated about Nonaka's organizational learning theories, Nonaka emphasized the importance of implicit knowledge transfer or knowledge transfer systems. So it is still remain a problem. how to transfer implicit or tacit knowledge into systems and maintain in long way. This is a very essential point, I think. That's all. Okay?
Thank you. Thomas, you're head of data science at Prewave. You and your company is using AI to manage supply chains. Could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us how Prewave is using data science and AI to tackle challenges in the logistics space?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invite. So my background is kind of in academia. I did my PhD and then started 7 years ago to come to Prewave and tackle the supply chain risks. And what we really do is trying to bring transparency to something like supply chains, which are inherently intransparent. And there's a lot of different challenges here you have to tackle. If you talk about a bigger customer of us, they potentially have 20, 30, 40,000 different suppliers. Even managing this and understanding where are the risks for my manufacturing production line is really hard. But in fact, you not only have to understand this, but you have to understand the deeper supply chain. And this is something which is really hard and in the past was barely done, which meant that a lot of decisions are made on best guesses, but not on data. And what we are trying to do is, or what we are doing, is increasing the transparency, giving data to people and to management, to our customers, so to enable them to actually make good decisions, to understand the risks in their supply chain, and to mitigate these problems. Yeah. So, yeah.
Can you share some real-world examples of your product?
Yeah, so there's various parts to it. For example, if you think about really drastic events like COVID outbreak, a war in the Ukraine, right? There are certain things people are not aware of. For example, in the Ukraine, it was the wire harnesses. So this was one product only produced there. And suddenly, I mean, everybody manufacturing knows if I miss one critical part of my component, nothing works anymore, right? So understanding what are the risks, for example, how I'm exposed to certain risks, to certain events, is one part of it. And this is data we understand by understanding the supply chains of our customers, understanding what is out there, where is the clusters of problems. So that's one way how AI can help. There is just a lot of information available. The problem nowadays is more, how can we aggregate this information to help people understand what decision they should make? And for this AI, and especially the advances we had in the last years, gives so much opportunity of solving this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stefan, as the product manager for industrial AI at Keba, can you give us a quick overview of your role at Keba and how Keba is leveraging AI to innovate in industrial automation?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the invitation at first. I am a product manager for industrial AI, which can mean a lot of things. But in the actual factual thing that I do in my daily business, we created an edge accelerator device, which is used to mainly give our customers the calculating power on our control systems to really delve into calculating neural networks. So this is more or less the product I manage. And of course, in the last few years, the things around generative AI really exploded and overwhelmed everybody in the industry. So we're kind of looking to explore how we can utilize this as well, for example, in our engineering tools, and how we can really bring this technology to our customers.
Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through a typical use case that already exists?
So for the accelerator module, for example, machine vision is something that is really popular. So machine vision, we do this since, I think, forever in industry and manufacturing. But the thing that is new and enables us to do this really efficiently are neural networks. So for example, if you have to find objects inside a camera frame, this is very easily done with AI neural networks. So the neural networks, every one of you is probably familiar with that. And we bring our customers the capabilities inside the control system so that they can calculate such algorithms. and really benefit from the technology inside the framework that our existing portfolio provides.
Thank you. Michael, as key researcher at Pro2Future, could you introduce yourself and your company and describe how your work is advancing the role of AI in smart production?
So thank you. So Pro2Future is a company founded for one thing only, namely transforming the industry. And we do that by basically cognifying the industry, by making it more sustainable, because this is what our planet needs, and by also tailoring AI to be human-centered. This is something which is really crucial, and my area focus on the perception field, so we look into how we can perceive environments, how we can perceive processes, how we can perceive what people do in these environments and with these processes, and to really focus on how to integrate this all into, let's say, a consolidated view, and to really, empower people to do better manufacturing. So basically, things like predictive maintenance, quality control, avoiding resources loss, and we have a lot of projects in that area, a lot of different tools we use. And
can you elaborate on one particular project where your work has made manufacturing smarter?
For example, we have a large project with a process company here in Austria, and there we really look into let's say the very insides of the process. So we are sitting down with the domain experts, we are applying the algorithms, we are analyzing the data, we are visualizing our solutions, we do discussions. So AI is not all about the technical things, it's also about engaging with the people and shaping a value out of that. And this is something which we do in a lot of our processes, projects.
Thank you, Michael. Before we address the potentials of machine learning and AI in the industry, I would first like to address the challenges. We're in Europe, after all, where we first see the problems. When we're talking about machine learning and AI in the production process, it's really not about basic research of AI models or so. It's about integration and the proper training of the models in the process. That's a question for the whole panel, so please feel free to interrupt if you need to. What are the biggest hurdles you guys face when integrating AI into existing processes or control systems?
Well, I think we can all agree on data quality is an issue, right?
Yes. Maybe I would add data quality on the one hand, but also domain expertise. So when we deal with the manufacturing industry, these are highly specialized industries. So basically, they create money out of what they do. So they are highly optimized. So getting the knowledge, the domain knowledge out of the project part of the the machines, how they operate, of the individual people who are good at operating those machines. This is I think one of the major issues, and also data annotation is also a big challenge.
Let's stay at the first point that you made before we go to the data quality, which is a big issue. I think domain knowledge. How do you tackle that?
Rather simple, just by talking and by exchanging ideas and by sharing perspectives on on the things. So this is a thing which needs time, which needs trust. So it's a lot about applying human intelligence in order for us to apply artificial intelligence, and this is actually where we then make the impact, because we do our research, we survey the literature. This all has to be done anyway, but it's also very, very important, to find, let's say, the nail for the hammer.
You need domain knowledge, which means you need the engineer in the manufacturing plant. Do you encounter a high degree of collaboration there, or is there more of hesitation?
As usual, there is an initial hesitation which has to be overcome. But I think once a certain level of trust is really engaged or created, it's really easy to collaborate. So, if people perceive the other side, is also focusing on the problem and not so much on the tool, let's say, then, it really goes forward. And then it's a back and forth, so, every side benefits. And I think this is really important, that all the parties in the process, can really benefit from the collaboration.
Yeah, we have some kind of issue with our kind of business we do with that. So basically, we are a control manufacturer, and building trust with one party is maybe proportionally building distrust with another. So basically, we have the experience that the companies, they don't want to share their inner workings of the machines with us, more or less. Because if we find something that makes their machine better, we could handily sell that to a competitor of theirs. And therefore, we are in a rather different situation because we're not as research heavy as your company is.
Yeah, I mean,
the trust building is the same, I guess, but I think there is some different maybe areas of how you can build up the trust.
Yeah, maybe we are a little bit easier to engage with because we are a non-profit research organization. So
exactly,
we have, let's say, maybe an easier start or let's say an upfront trust. But it's really important then to take the people on the road to really go down that road together and end up somewhere.
The first thing that came up was data quality. And the reality is, on the shop floor, maybe even in Japan, I don't know, that there is a lot of companies where critical machinery exists, where people don't even know what the software is that runs on it. How do you guys, that's an open question for everyone.
In Japanese industry, experts or human operators are very familiar with the continuous improvement of the target systems. They think the existing systems are incomplete. So they have in nature to improve them. So operators can change the system functionalities. But to export such Japanese systems, it is not good. They are not allowed in the exported manufacturing systems. Operators are not allowed to change the system functionality. So this is somewhat different. To overcome such issues, to assure data qualities, it is important. One thing is to generate new data, not to gather. It is one thing. The other thing is opposite way. We should make a system completely, fully automated ones. This is a somewhat different approach, but both is necessary, I think. Okay.
Yeah, creating new data to work on is I think, a very important point, because more often than not, the created data by the system is not really enough for algorithms to work properly. Other systems, I guess, there are a lot of sensor data available where you can really do all the things and do the analysis, but I have the same feeling that very many operating lines are not too well equipped on sensor data and really storing that somewhere in a particular way to work on that.
so many data is better, but importance is very small. Item is not so large. So this is somewhat contradicting conditions. Yeah.
Thomas,
maybe to breach the bridge between the trust and the data quality, because if you're not really able to say I really want to automate a factory and I cannot claim I can deal with all edge cases properly, I will not convince management to put something into place. And I've seen projects where it really failed on that from a data science perspective. You have something which can improve the system, but let's say the management didn't want to take the risk, because for them, if it goes well, it's a little bit better, but if it goes bad, it's a huge risk, right? So overcoming this kind of trust issue is also really a data quality question.
Yeah. Michael?
I mean, I guess this fear of loss is also something which somehow is always, hindering us a little bit. So if you consider, what the Americans are doing, they are investing millions and millions and millions just on, for example, OpenAI. So the amount of spending which is done there with no early revenue coming. This is kind of hindering us to a very large degree, and I think this is somehow where we need to change a little bit.
But isn't it that it's hindering maybe the basic research? Does it really hinder industrial application of AI?
Yes, it does, because these things we talked about, ensuring data quality, ensuring trust, those take time. And time is money, so it always takes money as well. And I think this is, and it's not like you can go to a highly optimized industry, apply some algorithm there, and on the next day you have a money printing machine. This is not gonna happen. Okay, it takes really investment. It takes focused work of experts to arrive at a certain level, and this takes time. And we need to do these types of investments. We need to change the industry. We need to, stick to the goals we want to pursue. Okay, and head down that road. I mean, this is what we need to do. So, standing still will probably end up in us being still there.
Yeah. Also, I think it takes time and invest for companies to really build up their own counterparts of AI companies. So data science departments, and really build up some kind of knowledge inside the companies takes money and invest. And I think that's crucial for making these processes even faster, and really have some people inside your own company curate the data already, such that experts like the Proto-Future can come in and start on earlier and faster. So.
Where does the Austrian industry stand there globally?
Difficult question. I think as of my experience, when I go to customers and tell them that we now have something that can calculate neural networks, more often than not, the purchasing department, that is the counterpart, is so, and what does AI exactly do now? So the knowledge built up in the industries, it's now getting better over the past 2 years, I think. So before the rise of ChatGPT and then the big hype around AI, nobody actually knew that AI existed, more or less. But now it's getting a little bit better, but I think we have some kind of work to do here in knowledge building. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I think in terms of good ideas, we're really good, but very often these ideas somehow they go there, and then we don't see the investment yet, or the return on investment yet, and then they are turned down. And somehow we have this gap between investment and potential, where the Americans are much better at. So, high gains, high risk, high investment.
Thomas, the question to you as well, because your clients are international, I would say, no? Do you see a comparatively high interest from Austrian companies in your logistics forecast service? Or
our clients are, of course, very international. It's bigger companies which have headquarters and like, let's say, facilities around the world. Of course, we have a lot in Germany, Austrian as a market, as clients. But more on a general note, I would say, in the industry, you have certain, especially in manufacturing, there are certain cycles you work on, timeframes you work on. And what we see right now is that the research and the progress in AI is just incredible fast. And it's just very hard, I think, for all industries to keep up with this. If we say now investments, I could think of a million things where you can invest to apply AI to make things better. Selecting the right one is actually not so easy. Like, where does your money bring the most impact on your production line? So I think we are in this interesting situation where there is so much opportunity. And yes, you can put so much money on this and make so many things better. But it's also really challenging to work with this really quick update cycles, this really quick research in this kind of industries.
Final question on the obstacles, so to say. How do you guys see the EU's recent regulations on AI? Are they what effect do they have on specifically on the application of AI in the industry? Do they have an effect as Europe as an innovation hotspot for this, or don't they?
Well, I think for machine builders especially, it's quite good that they now have some kind of guidance. They know that there is some kind of regulations. I think machine building companies tend to have, they like Maschinenrichtlinie and things like that, because then they know exactly where they can go and where the limits are of something like that. For the innovation part, I think it could be kind of hindering. But
why?
I'm
not a researcher, so.
Okay. I think that the beginning of 21st century, only Google can learn from data. But these years, we can learn even in small computers. So this is advanced technology. And in my experience, recent AI machine learning techniques work well, even from the small data. And interestingly, some older version of large language models, say GPT-2 or such a thing, it is free. But using such systems, with our own data, they can run, and the performance is very well. So in such a case, data are considered to be some sentences. So then we design new type of manufacturing systems, such as somewhat established techniques.
Could you tell us, are there similar ideas of regulation in Japan?
Yeah. Our regulation in Japan is very, very severe. And they are very conservative. So to develop advanced AI systems, it should be used to establish software or establish techniques.
So did I get that right? In Japan, there is a higher degree of regulation?
Yeah. Okay. So too severe, I think.
I think the interesting thing is, regulation can be both a burden, but also an opportunity. And if we think about it, so we have these high standards. So if we can build the technology to adhere to these standards, they fit the rest of the world. But the other way around, it's very difficult. And since we as European, we learn from these regulations from a very, very young age already. So we are
As we were told that the machinery industry likes the regulation?
Exactly, because basically then, especially with AI, there are boundary cases which you cannot really, which you know there are, but maybe you don't have enough data on it. So having, let's say, an outside box which somehow regulates your thing is actually kind of beneficial, because then you're on the safe side when you operate machines with AI, that they are somehow, safe for humans to work with.
Exactly. I think it also builds some kind of trust that you have to operate inside these boundaries, and you cannot build something and sell something that does not adhere to these regulations. Right.
Do you think, only a quick answer, that there is no regulations or little regulations in the US because the technology comes from there? Or is this just another mindset there?
Mindset, I would say.
Yeah, I think mindset, yeah.
And also, we had just recently a talk by a law professor at JKU, and also the legal system is completely different. So here, the standard way is regulate first and then do something. And there it's, do something first and then regulation comes in. And this is what we already see now also with so we have the AI Act now, it's there, okay? So we can build on it. The US is starting to do that right now, because they see now, okay, this stuff has a lot of problems, we need to deal with it.
So everything is forbidden unless it's explicitly allowed in Europe, as we grow up with that.
Yeah.
Let's move on from the limitations to the potentials of AI in industry. That's a question for all of you, and I'd like to probably start with Michael. As AI advances, what untapped potential do you see in autonomous manufacturing systems?
One of the very nice things about these systems is basically you can define multiple objectives which it should pursue in its training algorithm. And I think this is really something where we are not completely there yet, but me and my team, we are working on this stuff, that we not only focus on being just more efficient, but also have secondary targets like avoiding a lot of waste, because you produce the thing faster, but it has also more waste. So you optimize it a little bit to be, let's say, less efficient, but then you avoid the waste, and then overall, let's say, you have a better, or it's economically and ecologically better product. And I think this is really the really nice thing about these things, about the AI models, that you can add these objectives, and it can you can balance those things out, and then you get something which is more than a single optimization system.
What untapped potential is there in logistics?
A lot, I would say. Working in the job of getting information out of public available sources or others, there's infinite amount of information, right? So understanding it is the challenge, and there are a lot of different kind of informations which can help you in your supply chain and understanding risks. Just if you think about what kind of things can happen, from like a disruption to financial things to natural disasters and all of this. So I would say in the last 2 years, the technologies which came up, I cannot understate how quickly the changes are. Really, every month you kind of have to sit down and rethink things and get new models and tune them and so on. So really, these update cycles are a huge challenge we can do as a startup, but I imagine it being an impossible challenge for a lot of bigger companies. Yeah. So from the applications, I see limitless applications, and I'm looking forward to tap as many as possible in the future.
What potential do you see?
Well, as the shortage of skilled labor is increasingly present in the industries, in the manufacturing industry especially, I think that things that are really a lot of human labor right now can be automized even further with the use of AI. For example, if you take quality inspection at the end of line, that is mostly, or in a lot of production lines, it's still done by humans, and they take the thing and look at it and say, yeah, that's a good one. And really automizing these processes can enhance really the productivity and also a little bit mitigate the problem of having shortage of labor.
Mm-hmm. Well, quality controls is probably not the vision I was looking for. Let me pose the question differently. How far are we away from self-sufficient AI-controlled production lines?
I think
are we talking 2040?
That's a bold prediction to make, actually. So I don't really know if we're near to the realm of having fully automated production lines. But we're getting there in the advances of robotics and AI and everything. I think we can manage to have dark facilities without any light switched on and producing stuff in the future, of course.
Okay. The limitation of AI technique is that expertise transfer, it is still remain unsolved. If so many data are available, something like tacit knowledge is necessary to good operations. So, but in essence of engineering technology or engineering discipline, we must make implicit knowledge to explicit and systematize, and then they all can use the engineering disciplines. So, in this sense, AI technology is the same. To challenge expertise transfer is very, very essential.
How far are we away from AI organized logistics?
Logistics has a lot of parts, so I would say it's definitely a more difficult thing to challenge, like all parts of logistics. I think, though, that from an information point of view, we are getting more and more there. It will be a combination of different things. It will be, we see also new legislation, increasing information, forcing also people to reveal certain information. Together with AI technology, I think we will have a much better understanding of supply chains in the upcoming years. And that will also give this opportunity to improve there and the opportunity to automate. Yeah. So let's see.
Michael, as a researcher, can I get a date from you?
Never. I would never do that. I mean, this is similar than the question to AGI. Depending who you ask, you get next day or the day afterwards. Could happen anytime soon, could happen never. So I would stick, the future is not really
uncertain.
The future is uncertain, definitely. To some degree, maybe predictable. And yes, I mean, self-optimized factories could be something of the future. But I think this idea of this completely dark factory is very, very, very far away. So what I actually expect to see for the next 20 or 30 years is basically this human AI collaboration. So where basically, for example, AI generates optimization strategies, human oversight then decides what to do. Because in the end, we also need to understand that there is that a lot of things need human creativity, and this is also something which we need to leverage in addition to using AI.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a perfect last word. Thank you, Professor Terrano.
Yeah,
thank you, Thomas, Stefan, Michael. Unfortunately, we weren't able to open the floor for discussions, which was, I think, thought about. But I think you guys are staying here, and the audience can take the opportunity to ask you questions afterwards when you're outside. With that said, I'll hand the stage back to Ina to guide us through the rest of the day.
Well, thank you. That was our manufacturing panel. A big applause for our panelists. Thanks for sharing your future visions with us and giving us an insight how AI might revolutionize this industry. Thanks to Rudolf Leudl, who did a good job. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, really inspiring. That was our manufacturing panel. I mean, one thing is clear, AI technologies can definitely create competitive and sustainable advantages. That's what our experts have underlined also right now. Sustainability, ladies and gentlemen, is already the right and the perfect keyword for our next panel, and the perfect keyword for my co-presenter, AI.
I hope you're all enjoying the conference. Let's move on to our next program point, the Green and Cleantech panel. In this session, we'll explore how AI is playing a pivotal role in shaping the future of green technology and sustainability. From optimizing eco-friendly processes to revolutionizing energy trading and conservation, AI is driving innovation towards a cleaner planet. Our panel will feature leaders and innovators who are using AI to tackle some of the biggest environmental challenges we face today. So get ready to learn how AI-powered solutions are paving the way for a sustainable future as we aim for clean energy.
Yes, we are ready and are now looking forward to an exchange of experience between four experts whom I'm delighted to introduce and welcome right now. Please welcome Michael Denzler, Senior Leader at Zülke Engineering Austria, Alice Schmidt, Advisor and the author of The Sustainable Puzzle, Benjamin Mörzinger, Co-founder of Nista.io, Nate Wine, Co-founder and CEO of Floodlight, and he's back on stage, our AI expert for everything, as he named himself, Clemens Wassner. Clemens, thanks for jumping in. To be honest, this panel should be accompanied by Lisa Höllbacher. She unfortunately fell ill. So all the best, and we wish her a speedy recovery. Thank God that you're flexible, and we're looking forward to an interesting discussion that is accompanied by you.
Thank you. So yeah, others just fell ill. You have to endure my moderation. So be aware. Yeah, before we, let's say, dive into the questions and so on, I think because most of the audience, I would assume is not familiar with what your companies are doing. So perhaps each of you could make, let's say, a TLDR, 1 to 2 sentences. What is your company doing in the area of AI sustainability or your organization? So let's start with Nate, the great.
Yeah, I'm Nate Wine. We're Floodlight. We use satellites and sensors and then AI to interpret the data to measure greenhouse gas emissions and calculate climate risk.
Yeah, my name is Benjamin. I'm one of the founders of Nista. We develop an AI energy co-pilot that helps us to provide all-in-one energy management to industrial manufacturing companies.
Hi, my name is Alice Schmidt, and I've been working for 25 years at the intersection of
the environment, social sustainability, and business. And in the last few years, I've been taking AI as well on board. And I consult, I teach at the university, and I help businesses basically see the bigger picture.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mick. I'm from Silke. So Silke is a innovation provider in engineering and consulting for companies across the globe, focused also on Europe. And we help basically to bring innovation into sustainability so that we can manage this sustainability change as a whole society.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, for the first round of questions, I would like to dive into the economic opportunity at the intersection of AI and sustainability, because let's say for outsiders or people that are not that familiar with the topic, it always sounds like, you know, a little bit of greenwashing, or maybe this might be some small businesses. But at the same time, if you read reports from, let's say, Goldman Sachs calculated that just to decarbonize the European electricity grid, coming from, let's say, all layers of the grid, you would need to spend the equivalent of Italy's GDP over the next 30 years. So this is just to put this into perspective just for Europe. And so having two startup representatives on the stage, could you elaborate a little bit of the market you're actually working in? And let's say, how big is this opportunity that you're tackling?
Sure. So a lot of where we operate is RegTech, so CSRD, CBAM, a lot of the other regulations coming out of Brussels are major points of concern for CEOs, CFOs, boards, and they're spending a lot of money on getting those reports correct. And so we see that market, I mean, just calculating it easily in the tens and 20s of billions this year, and then doubling probably every 5, because we believe the European Commission is going to continue to lower the bar from now at 40 million euros a year to 20 million and so on. That will all be under the umbrella as it is of CSRD. And if those numbers are incorrect, the penalties are 4% of EBITDA. So that's death to any C-suiter.
Cool. Then.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's pretty much the same. So our market is energy management systems. You would have to look at those companies that we target, which are industrial manufacturing companies, and then make the energy management market a bit smaller so that you can actually talk about our market. Nevertheless, the numbers for the energy management market have already been rather high in 2019, and everything that happened since then has helped to increase this market. The demand for proper energy management solutions has been increasing in the past few years, not just in Europe, but globally. So also in the order of billions and rapidly increasing.
So before I come to research and Alice, a quick question to Michael, because here we have two representatives from VC, so venture capital backed or funded startups. Which industry opportunities is your company or your teams at Silke tackling? And what is typically the expectation of the client in terms of, let's say, energy savings or CO2 reduction or hard euros at the end of the day?
Yeah. So we are tackling, I think, two different business problems or business opportunities. One is the regulative, also with CSRD very strong in Europe, which just has to be fulfilled. But we also see it as a chance to go beyond pure reporting. So we see CSRD as a chance to get transparency into the data, to go away from greenwashing and really get the data foundation, find interesting solutions that solve the customer's problems, but also go beyond the technology to also do the change management in the organization. The other one is we try to help companies to create innovative products. So we have consultants, for example, also in the space of circular economy, which is also a big, I think, business potential, and a big also potential to apply AI, because this often go hand in hand. The demand for data is growing with circular economy.
Cool. So last but not least,
before you even ask, I would like to say something about the business case, because yes, the business case is very clear, and the business case for sustainability is very clear, and it's great that companies are able to make money by helping other companies to reduce their impact, right? That's excellent, and I could, mention other examples from other sectors. But I think one thing to really understand is also that unsustainability per se comes with a dramatic cost that we all have to bear. When we talk about climate change only, the costs of preventing or mitigating climate change are actually much, much lower than the costs of not acting, by a factor of 6. So it costs 6 times more money to not do anything, because climate change is already destroying GDP. What was your question?
The answer was 42. No, but you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I can only agree with what you just said. However, I talked about, let's say, 100, probably even more, decision makers in manufacturing companies, mainly in Austria and Germany. And the amount of awareness for what you just said, which is correct, is sub-zero. So hardly any, we tried arguing that GDP is destroyed, and we tried to argue that CO2 emissions are expensive and that energy prices are becoming more important, and all of that stuff. However, whenever I talk to any manufacturing company and really decision makers in there, you can only argue about the prices and the cost in consequence. And it's really, really interesting to see how far we are, in at least my very limited perspective, from actually adhering to the scientific facts that should lead our society to really significantly change how we, in my case, operate our manufacturing plants. It's ridiculous, and it's certainly going to hurt us badly in the next few years if we continue to question every sustainability effort by what is the hard number and what is the ROI, and can we argue that it's going to pay back in 2 months' time. I mean, this is just ridiculous, and that's very much the fact still.
Thank you for that. I love that. Can I come in just on one thing? Because I think the solution is true cost. True cost means basically that companies price in and do not externalize, and they will have to do that, right? Due to regulation by the EU, by Austria. So that will come, that is coming, it's already there to an extent. And so the companies that actually start taking action early are in the lead. They're going to save cost as well, right? Because at the moment, I mean, we're paying what, 30, 35 euro for a ton of carbon, right? I mean, that's way too little. The societal costs are somewhere near 700. Some people say, well, it's only 200. That's where we will get. And that's when it will really pay off for companies to have saved energy, among other things.
But the cost discussion right now, what's the ROI, is difficult, but that's why I also have customers. For example, I remember a banking customer 2 months ago, a sustainability manager saying, I'm happy they're CSRD. Because this gives a value to sustainability, and now we have to bring in this transparency of how sustainable are we, and this gives me the chance to say how sustainability can help creating revenue to my bank. So we can help them to position, I don't know, green mortgages proactively, and this increases their business potential.
And there's a book for that. Now, see, finally, I can make the intro. Now, because what is interesting about this topic, I mean, I don't know how many green tech waves there have been. I think more than quantum computing waves already. So I'm 44. I think this is now the 4th or 5th green tech wave I hear about. What is different, in my opinion, this time is you have, of course, you have the very large players, but you also have lots of small players, and that the innovation happens both on the regulatory side, which is mandated by the governments across the globe, like CO2 auditing and so on. But it also goes in the direction of, let's say, cost reduction. And this is, let's say, here you have the immediate incentive alignment coming from the industries. I think this is also what Benjamin mentioned. The companies don't care about the big mission, at least outside of the marketing department, they don't care about it. But if you show them hard euros and cents that you can reduce, they're immediately there. So this was a very long intro for the book question. You're dealing with this topic from a research side for, you mentioned, 20 plus years. How do you see the current wave of green entrepreneurship also represented on this stage versus previous waves?
So I must say that I have been writing books, including this, but also the sustainability puzzle. But I have actually been mostly working in practice, though what I have been working on is not just with businesses, even though I have a business background, but also with the UN, United Nations, NGOs, and that has enabled me to really see this bigger picture. So in terms of waves, I mean, I see there's a lot of hypes. And I think all of these hypes tend to bring some positive tools, some positive ideas for sustainability, but they're not utilized. Yeah? And this hype, it's not a hype, right? I mean, AI is there. It's changing our world, whether we want it or not. And I think the opportunities are there. This is a massive game changer. It could be a massive game changer even for sustainability, if we really want it. And that depends on who owns the models, right? Who develops the models. It used to be universities. Now it's mostly companies. We know big tech firms are more powerful than entire nation states, right? I mean, if you compare market capitalization and GDP, that's a big one. And I'd just like to give the example of Google and Microsoft. Google and Microsoft are both companies that used to be, well, that still are. They still have very ambitious climate goals, carbon reduction goals. They're, of course, two of these very big ones, and Microsoft even has a goal to go carbon negative by 2030. Yeah? And that's great. Of course, this plays into the business model with direct air capture, etc. But in the last 3-4 years, with the AI boom, they've actually not only not reduced their emissions, they've raised them by 30 to 50% respectively. And that's a big thing. That's called the Jevons paradox. Yeah? So the more efficient something becomes, the more of it we use. Yeah? And that's been true 150 years ago at the start of the Industrial Revolution. And it's true now. And so we can manage this, but we really have to manage it. And that's why we need to see the bigger picture.
Thank you. Speaking of incentive alignment, where do you see, coming from the United States and now Vienna transplant, where do you see the biggest difference in the approach of commercializing AI green tech between the States and the EU? And maybe also elaborate a little bit why we had the opportunity to welcome you in Vienna at the open shop here.
Yeah. I mean, to answer your last question, the Vienna Business Agency had reached out to us, and we were dating London, Amsterdam, and Berlin as places to set up our first European headquarters. And VBA looked at us and said, look, Vienna wants to be the sustainability capital of the world. We have a lot of focus groups here, a lot of the educational focus and business focus would be here, come take a tour. And the market and the connectivity here really blew the competitors out of the way. So we set up our GmbH here last year for that. But to your question on the profitability side, I really see in the US, there's a lot more of the C-suite, CEOs, CFO, et cetera, that are getting part of their annual bonus tied to sustainability directives. So 10, 15% of if you get a €100,000 bonus, it would be tied to you being able to deliver on a sustainability goal, like path to net zero by 2030 or whichever else. What I see in Europe is there's a lot more focus on an actual number. And unfortunately, in the US, it's a lot more beautiful websites, and there's a little kid holding a flower in front of a windmill. But there's just not a lot of doing, because it's mostly virtue signaling. So specifically with the US election coming, that's going to be a big indication as to which way my country is going to look at this, because one candidate has a pretty strong green agenda, the other one is pretty much the opposite for it. But I think what CSRD did is it really said, we don't care what happens to the politics. If you want to sell here, you have to confirm this. So I see, similar to your point, the companies that will be profitable on this are the ones that already have realized the train has left the station. Instead of pretending to play politics one way or the other, this is already gone, and you won't survive as a company in 10 years if you don't think sustainability is part of true risk management.
So now a question actually for each of you. I mean, we talked a lot about, let's say, energy optimization, carbon auditing, and so on. So there is definitely a boom going on. But in your experience, which areas are still underserved, or where would you have expected a green tech solution, but it has not manifested yet?
I would probably go manufacturing, but that's more.
I mean, my answer to that is energy management has been around for quite a while, and it's far from being an underserved market. It's just the way it is served is very, very bad. So it's something that doesn't help manufacturing companies at all, what they see in the market. And this is where technology comes in, and also our way of doing energy management, which is in large parts technologically driven. It's much more customer-oriented. It's much more oriented towards the needs of the people that are actually operating within the plant. So even though it's far from being an underserved market, energy management as a whole, the way people used to be doing it is just so practical that we still can get new customers and yeah, make them more successful than they have been. So maybe I'm not even the best person to ask that, but because I'm very much focused on energy management. So even in overserved market, you would argue a new and innovative solution can really make a change.
Yeah, no, but this is a very interesting insight because people read that energy management companies exist for construction, for manufacturing, and so on. But at the end of the day, what is actually implemented and the savings that are generated are, let's say, several orders of magnitude smaller than what you would have expected.
Yeah, just briefly add to that. Energy management is not a piece of technology. It's something that you have to include into your daily operations. It just makes energy a thing that you care about, like human resources or the materials that you buy. It's nothing that inherently needs technology. However, if your manufacturing plant becomes complex enough, technology will be something that you will need. And so what comes more and more is that people realize that, and that spreadsheets and telephone and email are not enough to really drill down on the last few % of savings that you need to realize in order to adhere to CSRD. And this is where solutions like ours come in now.
So, brief follow-up, was the, let's say, energy price situation, let's call it like this, since February, was this a tailwind for your business? And
sure.
How did it manifest, let's say, were the goals becoming more ambitious, or were the people desperate, like you were selling ice cream on the beach, to even get the project with you done?
So most of my days talking to customers, and I could book my vacations based on the energy future market. So if it goes down, then I have free time, and if it goes up, then today I can be here because the energy price is relatively low again. So definitely there is a very strong correlation, especially in the short-term oriented companies that we talk to. The real interesting customers that we have are the ones that care about what happens in 10 years. And those are the ones that also don't look at the energy price changes too much, because it's just it becomes more volatile. It changes over the day in the order of 5 times the energy price. At times you get even money when you get energy from the network. So those that are not really our customers care a lot about energy price. Those that really are our customers take care about what happens with their company in the next 5 to 10 years. We are lucky enough that the majority of companies in Austria is still of the latter category, and those will need energy management, proper energy management that really helps them to become sustainable.
And who will manage the energy management? Now, because you mentioned the Jevons paradox before, this is, we have this with the roads. If you make a road wider, it will lead to more traffic jam. And the Microsoft phenomenon now culminates in Google and Microsoft procuring their own nuclear power plants. So this is like as extreme as it gets when it comes to power consumption. That would be a question to the two of you. How do you see, let's say, which countermeasures are already, let's say, getting started or will be necessary to deal with this situation? Because it's very unrealistic that smaller companies will have much cheaper access to energy. This is just not something that will happen in the next 10 years. If you look at, let's say, the construction of new solar power plants or whatsoever.
Yeah, a great question, because now we've been talking a lot about strategic orientation, right, of companies, and I think the operational aspects, like the footprint, right, the ecological footprint of a company is very important here. And in terms of energy management, there is a lot that can be done when it comes to AI. And actually, generally computing, it's the hardware, right, that has the biggest impact. So that's something we need to take into account. And it's also in terms of, so if you, for an iPhone, for example, roughly speaking, right, you have 80% of the energy used in the production and 20% by using items. But what that also means for companies, for every company, is that they need to invest more consciously in hardware. Then they need to keep that hardware for longer. They need to repair it, which means it needs to be repairable, right? That could be, I'm sure, there could be AIs helping with that. And then this is about optimizing code, right? This is about balancing memory and processing, right, or adjusting that. And I think there's a lot of options that companies have. And in terms of service, right, so yes, location matters, but actually we don't have infinite locations. And there was even a case in Ireland, I think, where basically there was a data center was competing with a housing project, right? And who gets the power really was the question. So that is an issue. We don't have infinite amounts of power. I mean, clearly not, or energy in the short term. So location matters, but also time when you actually run your machines, right, matters. Right? I mean, the energy mix matters. So for example, if you are in Australia, your energy consumption would be 73 times as much as in Switzerland. So there are things companies can do, but I think just in the end it comes back to cost, because once this price of damage is priced in, companies will see the business case even more clearly, not just the really cool ones, right, that you've been talking about, that think 10 years ahead and that are in the lead and will be the successful companies of the future.
Thank you. I mean, just to put this into perspective regarding the energy consumption, if I would Google, what is an example, which book did Alice write? Let's stick with the stage. And if I would use the same one in ChatGPT as a prompt, the energy difference in terms of consumption is factor 1,000. So this is gigantic. And there was a study conducted by Google last year, like what are the drivers for energy consumption of large language models or AI in general, and how can you reduce it? And from the topics you mentioned, you can make the models, let's say, more efficient. That has, let's say, a 2x, 3x factor. Then when it comes to the data center, it's also, let's say, 1.5x. There's not that much efficiency to gain because the data centers are already very efficient. But by far the biggest impact was the location of the data center. So they compared this, like the training of a large language model, how much CO2 output would it generate across several countries. By far the worst one was Germany, because they compared the G7 countries. So the conclusion was that if your company is already doing, let's say, end-to-end CO2 accounting, you have to use a Google Cloud or AWS region from Norway. So at the end of the day, not everybody will be able to do that, because they have lots of fjords, but they don't have unlimited fjords. so let's say, new way of thinking will be necessary. So,
sorry, can I come in this? And I'm amazed that you remember all these numbers. I don't. But also, of course, companies like Microsoft are putting their service underwater, right? Which makes cooling easy. You need less energy for cooling, but then that heats up the ocean. And we all know, at least for sure, since the floodings in the last few weeks, that this then accelerates climate change. So bigger picture again.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we also do is, of course, we consult about green IT and how to optimize your data center consumption and so on, but we also look at responsible AI principles. And these are usually just best practices for developing AI. One of them is the Occam's razor. If you've been technical, you maybe know that. So it says if you have two equivalent systems, use the simpler one. So we don't always need these big LLMs that are consuming crazy amounts of energy. Often the small specialized agents are enough. And if we can bring back this kind of principles that have been out there for good AI development and implement it into our development process, I think there's also another potential to just improve energy consumptions in our AI models.
Can I just say something on this? Because absolutely, right, smaller data sets. And I'm really glad that the field has really moved in a positive direction to an extent. in the last few years, because this is now kind of known, right? Not everybody knows it, but it's something that, that's accepted. But actually, a few years back, it was what kicked Timnit Gebru, right, from the Google ethics team out of the company, because she, together with some other researchers, had published a paper which is now super famous because of the scandal. It's called the Stochastic Parrot paper. And all it did was, it pointed out that there's an ecological footprint of AI, and it actually said also that, we don't always need bigger data sets. Sometimes small is beautiful. And so I'm really glad that we have progressed.
Well, and I would tack on with that too. A lot of what I think the previous panels were talking about was the purity of the data. And I think in our business, we use terabytes of information from satellite providers. And if we just sum totaled it or averaged it and throw it back to our clients, it would be worthless. And so being able to really siphon off through AI what is good data, what's precise data versus the garbage that's getting sold by a lot of data providers is crucial. And if you don't have an ambitious person or somebody that really wants to understand this new science, it's really hard to figure it out because most of the businesses are really comfortable on the financial side, but now seeing the variables that sustainability brings in can either be exciting if you're adventurous, and obviously we're entrepreneurs, that's kind of what we do, but it can be really scary if you have a C-suite person who's super confident and wants to stay in their position doing what they've always done with bad data, to then come in with newer data, more precise data, and say, hey, all of this was either incorrect or less precise than it should be. So in one of the questions we prepped for, I think in the same line for this, is what can companies do to prepare for AI? And I think the first one is be comfortable with what AI is giving you, because it's giving you a lot better data processing than what you could only do with humans before. But there is a lot of resistance to that because often you have people that are super comfortable in their position, they're getting highly compensated for what they're doing, and they looked at the last 10 years and said, cool, I can do this. AI changes all of that into that uncomfortable middle where we really should be living to actually learn.
Yeah, it also doesn't help if your job is defined by having a problem in the company, and if AI gets rid of the company, yeah, do I need to finish the sentence?
You got it.
In terms of data efficiency, that would be a question to Benjamin, because I think this is a super interesting aspect, but it is something that is, let's say, slowly getting steam because of the inefficiency of large language models. But if you look at your customers, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, the common thinking was get as much data as possible, IoT, whatsoever, save it into the cloud. Question mark is like the Homer Simpson business model. And in the end of the day, AI will find something. Do you see that there are nowadays, let's say, new ways of thinking that you start to collect the right data from the beginning and in general end up with a leaner operation, both from the analytics and, let's say, after applying AI?
That's a very big question. I try to give a good answer to that. So I grew up academically and also professionally in the Industry 4.0 hype. So this is what you alluded to, IoT devices everywhere, and everybody started to create data, and then we'll see what we can do with it. And it turned out a few years later, 500,000 in hardware invested in a factory. Nobody really knew what to do with the data. And well, we're still there pretty much, but this changes. What is really the biggest limiting factor for us when we approach a new customer is getting hold of what they already have there. So this is a large integration project that we have to do, and we are very efficient with it, but nevertheless it's work too, because now, 10 years later, we think most of the time we know what we can do with all these sensors that they have deployed. So in our case, increased energy efficiency. Something that I think I want to add, which was not your question, but nevertheless it's interesting because this last wave of LLMs and language models, back when I did my PhD, I dreamt about algorithms that knew where they should be applied to, and something that can help a milling operation, worldwide. And I was always looking for this machine god that knew which algorithm to apply to what. And what now LLMs do is very similar to what I dreamt about. And just on this panel, the last one, the big limiting factor of we need domain knowledge from the engineers was presented as a problem. And it very much was. But today, just try out prompting not even a premium version of ChatGPT with any engineering problem that you have, anything that you used to need to ask an engineer in a factory about. It's really, really good. So the ChatGPT presents you with a very good answer, and these engineers that you used to have to ask whether or not your machine learning algorithm actually makes sense or not, turns out they oftentimes are even worse than what ChatGPT tells you if you provide ChatGPT with the necessary meta information. But that's not too hard. You can just drop any PDFs that the company already has on their Microsoft server, and then ChatGPT will take care of that. And that's actually something that makes it even more interesting. So integrating with sensors that are already there, and then combining it with the context information of a given factory, and then just use language models that are already there, really is something that makes magic happen. So the results of that are amazing.
So before we come to the last round, anybody of you want to add something?
No, I was just thinking next year we'll have a panel on AI and jobs, right?
Yeah, with LLM moderator and 4 LLM panelists.
But no, we don't. Because whenever we talk about industry and the biggest challenges in Europe, it's Fachkräftemangel, the lack of proficient people. So you cannot argue that there are not enough experts in your field and then be afraid that AI is going to remove you from a job. Take one. But both is just cementing the status quo. So one has to be true, I agree. And I would argue that we have still enough to do for people that are real and acting in the real world and are able to talk to each other, even though we give all these really tedious, stupid, data-driven jobs to AI. It's not a problem that we have, but it's certainly some reaction that people have in their mind. So AI is taking my job now, and you really like your job so much.
It's terror.
It's the biggest fear, I think, other than other fears that perhaps are more justified. Can I ask a question to the audience before we come to the last round? Do we have time? I really wonder, I mean, you're here at an AI conference, but I still want to ask a question. Who in this room is a real techno-optimist, really hopeful and positive about the impact of AI? Okay, thank you. So I see a lot. Now, who is rather pessimistic, perhaps a bit worried about the impacts of AI on society?
So who's seen Black Mirror, basically?
Okay, so there's still a few people, and you're the brave ones, of course, right? Because at a conference like this, it takes perhaps courage to say that. No, but I think it's also important to realize that in general society, right, we have people at the opposite ends of the spectrum, and a lot of people in the middle, and we need to bring everyone in, and we need to make sure that everybody develops AI competence, right, to an extent. And we all, I mean, I need to continue to build my AI competence, and it's much harder for me, competence, because, you know, I'm not a techie by definition. But I think it's also, the importance is also, we can only make AI really good and really beneficial for the world if we don't leave it only to data specialists and IT people and so on, but if we include domain experts, right, and users, and really have diverse development teams, that takes a lot of the bias out, that helps with a lot of the other issues, including the green issues we discussed.
And here actually I see a big parallel to sustainability, which is both of them are these transformative topics that cannot be just led by the head of data, the head of sustainability, but yeah, we have to bring everybody on board, the optimists and the skepticists, to identify problems, know when to apply what, and leverage these opportunities.
Can I build on this just really briefly? Because sustainability in Austria and beyond has often been called CSR, corporate social responsibility. And it's still a concept we use, and companies have CSR departments or something of that shape and form. But I think now what we need is also CDR departments, right? And ideally they're actually integrated. That's why I'm sort of, building on your point. So CDR stands for Corporate Digital Responsibility. And the idea is that also in the digital space, companies need to take responsibility, and everyone, not just companies, of course, all organizations, for their societal and environmental impacts.
Well, I think this will work for the environmental impact because the governments across the globe mandate it. I think for the societal impact, this is very difficult to measure because, for example, there's this famous book, it's called amusing ourselves to death. That was written in the 1980s. And it was actually a very precise forecast of what to expect if you have abundance of media and you have media everywhere. And let's say he basically forecasted that the author back then that each of us will more or less live in his own bubble and eventually in his own information reality, because there's just so much created. I mean, he made it back then at the example of cable TV, but you see this nowadays with social media, and then with AI-generated social media, it's very likely that in, let's say, 3 years down the road, every feed will not just be differently filtered, but even differently generated. And I think this is surely one of the open flanks you have as a society in total. This cannot and will not be solved on a company level, I think, because they have no incentive to do that. Think of Facebook and so on, or it doesn't matter which company actually.
Cool. The risks are significant. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, big challenge. And of course, this polarization is also driven, right, by AI-supported models. I mean, they were there before, right? And I'm talking about fake news and election influencing and so on. But this is actually accelerating now. Yeah, so active influencing. Which also means companies mustn't always lobby against regulation.
We must not end this panel with a negative thing. We only have 4 minutes to go, so anybody should really come up with something positive to say now.
I have something positive.
You go, Nate, so please.
That was planned anyway. You took the words out of my mouth.
As a way to counter the skepticism, we are launching tomorrow. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you have the opportunity to nominate either a government, a city, a province, or a business, and we will do our service is free for them to let them hold up their own sustainability reporting versus what a satellite or a sensor can. So if you follow us on Floodlight tomorrow, we can actually hold up then that the data is winning out over just the rhetoric.
Love it.
I hope you can stay in Europe, because if you do this for corruption, you might have to leave. No, but
you already talked about Trump living in his own bubble.
Fingers crossed it will work out. Yeah, speaking of a positive note, what was so far let's say the most positive impact you saw in how AI is applied for Cleantech or the green energy transition? You're not allowed to mention your own company.
I mentioned a customer of ours.
That's okay.
No, it's really nice to see industrial manufacturing is a very abstract thing, and it's for the past 200 years it lived from taking people away from what they actually manufacture and making them more distant to the thing that they create. And what we now see is that the people that work together with us for a few months, so yeah, there's a bit of advertising here. Once they really see how much they saved by changing the operation of the facility, you see this little spark in their eyes again, and it's pathetic, not, but Nate, you have to help me out here. Never mind. It's really nice to see the spark in the eyes of these people that have been working for 20, 30 years in industrial manufacturing plants that haven't really been used to, or that are not used to that anymore. Sorry, I gave a way too long answer.
So I'll be quick. I'll use a very simple, maybe not the most impactful, but a really interesting aspect or example. IKEA is using basically cameras in their restaurants to scan food waste. And that has, in the UK at least, reduced food waste by 50% and has also, of course, saved costs. And something else that's positive, there's a green algorithms project in the UK, and it has a lot of calculators freely available for companies who do care about emissions and lots of information. And also really positive, in this book, we really provide a balanced view of the risks and opportunities in various aspects, including climate and circular economy, but also social inclusion, education, the world of work. And then we look a bit at power and regulation and the military and things like that. So it's a positive balance.
Yeah, something positive I see is when companies go into this path of circular economy. It just reminds me now of one company there in the logistics space for pharma. They sent these tracking devices together with vaccines or so that have been shipped around the world. So far, they were just shipped somewhere, arrived there, and then disposed. Now the customer wants to have real-time tracking and makes the device more expensive to produce. So this company is now going to circular economy, and once this keeps on owning these devices, then it's organized that they get shipped back, that they can be reused, that they can be recycled. I mean, they are on the journey there. They're not all the way to the end, but it's exciting to see this companies really embarking on this circular economy journey.
Cool. Thank you very much. And yeah, we will no longer stay between you and the buffet outside, aka lunch. Thanks for tuning in, and we meet again at 2 o'clock for lunch. And thanks, everybody. It was a very great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, jetzt nehmen wir.